I'm opening. We have an eye, sort of a nostril, 2 teeth. One of the teeth has a small cavity. Close call, folks, but I think we got here just in time.
Presented by Maria Menounos and Kevin Undergaro. This is Anatomy of a Movie. In-depth discussions and breakdowns of various movie titles. And now that you've seen the movie, let the dissection begin.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another X-Men special, because we did one last week where we talked about all the movies coming up to this one, X-Men Days of Future Past. Very excited to be here. We have on the panel Demetri Panos.
Hello, movie fans.
Sara Stretton.
Hi, guys.
Welcome
John,
back, Sara Stretton.
Thank you.
That's right.
John Comerford.
Hey, everybody.
And as promised, we have the film's composer, the film's editor, John Ottman.
Where am I?
Yeah, that's it.
There you go.
And we've even brought up Marisa Serafini out of the booth to join him on the
Nice.
couch to discuss this movie with us.
Hello, everyone. Hello, John.
Hi.
We've got quite the full team today.
And hello, John. Thank you very much for being
Yeah,
here.
appreciate you being here. Thanks for coming.
Big thrill. Big thrill for us.
This is
Great
cool.
to be here.
Are you pleased with
I
it?
think. I'm not sure. Oh, the movie?
Yeah, how do you
Yeah.
like the way it turned out? Yeah?
Yeah, I always look at something and go,
Yeah, of course, yeah. Are you able to look at any movie without doing that? I mean, are you
Yeah,
going...
no, I can get taken
Okay.
into a film. Not
Okay.
completely, though. I still see the heads in front of me and
Right.
the edges of the screen. I can never really completely forget where I'm at, you know. But I see most films on a plane because that's when I have the time to see them. And then I don't know. They say you get more emotional on planes, so I tend to cry a lot when I see movies on planes. I don't know. But
That was you.
Philomena is a wreck. You know.
Do you think that, have you ever been able to just really get absorbed into a film? Do you think that's gotten, like, in a way worse as you've had more
Now that you know
years
the
in the
sausage is made, do
industry?
you ever go...
Well, you know, the funny thing is, it's plus and minus. I mean, maybe it washes itself out because I don't see many movies at all because I'm so busy. And so
Right.
when I go, it's kind of like, wow, you know, and like, you know, a lot of my friends are so jaded to see every film and they're like over the 3D thing. I'm like, I love it. You know, it's like, I just, you know, it makes it more fun for me. So, because I just don't get out much. So, so in that regard, I kind of enjoy going to see a film in kind of a weird way.
Do you?
Unless there's some composer that got the movie that I didn't and I get
Yeah.
pissed off. You
Ooh,
know?
You know,
the
well, that's a
jealousy.
great question. Do you find yourself, because a lot of times some people end up, they're sort of jaded because, like, you know, you're an editor, you're a composer. Do you ever go to a movie and go, what the hell were they thinking when they edited this together this way? Or, like, does it ruin the experience
Even
for
as an
you?
editor, the editing's hard because you don't really know what was under the hood, what
Right.
they had to deal with, and so forth. I mean, I can tell if something's really poorly done, and I see an opportunity lost on the screen that I clearly know they could have done. That's frustrating, but you don't notice that as much. As an editor, it's really hard to judge editing by just looking at a movie. But in a general way, you can kind of make a judgment. Score wise, you can, you know,
Yeah.
I'm like, whoa, really? You
I-
know, so
yeah.
How did that get through all the mixers and the producers and they're like, cool, this is great, you know, really? I mean, how did it get there, you know? But you know, especially like I said, if it's a film I really would love to have done and the score sucked, it's really hard and frustrating, you know. But there's also composers out there who I hate to love, like Desplat. You know, it's like
Always-
I love his music,
We've
and
been
so
talking
he
about
gets
him.
every movie in town, but at least he's good, and so I feel better that okay, at least he did a good job. You know.
Well, then spill the beans. What was a project that? Yeah. What was the movie that you saw and you're like?
Well, I
I
can't
should
think of
have.
one specifically, but he sort of guided. I mean, I sort of had a wheelhouse that I was in for a while with like Suspects and movies that no one saw, unfortunately, though, like Incognito and even Moments of Our Pupil, which even though they're sinister, they sort of have a lyrical, piano-driven quality, and that sort of was a strength of mine. And then I kind of went off and did other stuff, and so he kind of, you know, made that his wheelhouse, and which it is, you know, and so when I see a film like that, I'm like, that's kind of what I kind of do naturally, but don't really get that opportunity.
Do you know him?
No,
Because yeah, we've talked about
Yeah,
him
at length,
Only you know, he did Philomena, Monuments Men, the recent Godzilla,
Right.
and he seems to almost be a chameleon. He just does so many different kinds
Yeah.
of scores. But you as well, or at least I think so. Before we started this taping, I was talking about what brought me in recognizing you is Kiss Kiss Bang Bang.
Right.
And you did this amazing score where you were jumbling all these different kinds of like genres, like noir, caper film, like throwbacks to the 30s, 40s. Like, how was that for you in working with Shane Black and
Well, it was.
putting that all
I had a
together?
blast on that. I mean, that's one of my favorite film experiences, film composing experiences. And I think he thought I hated the movie. He wrote these really cool liner notes for me on the CD. Did you read those?
I did.
He does this whole psychoanalysis of me, and I'm like, holy crap! I got to be careful about how I present myself now, because he writes this whole thing how he was sure I hated the movie, but when I go in to see a film, I'm thinking about what I need to do, you know, and so I'm not just watching the film, and so I kind of must have walked out saying, okay, because I was in this sort of, but then when I cracked it, because I didn't know what to do, because there wasn't really tempt with much at all, and so which is good, so I can go to bed at night knowing I wrote this thing that came from my head and not feel like I had to rip anything off. But when I found the theme, and the funky thing that I came with these percussion tracks and I sent it to Joel Silver, and he was like, I love it, I'm playing with my car every 5 minutes. My wife hates me, so.
That's a very good Joel Silver.
Oh yeah, you got to do this, like But so then I was excited because it was sort of like a relief. Okay, I found my groove, and so then I just had a great time with it,
Yeah, and you seem to have a really great time on that.
Yeah.
And again, it's one of my favorite films.
Did you have a great time on Unusual Suspects? Because that's still in my top 10.
Yeah.
I don't remember it being a great time, but I mean,
Okay.
I don't remember it being such a bad time either. Just sort of like I don't think it was sort of, I didn't know what we were really doing. It's like I just saw that sort of a glorified student movie because I didn't know who any of the actors were. Because even then I never saw films really that much because I was watching just Star Trek,
Sure.
And but which is good because I didn't have an association of who those actors were with any other prior parts or roles. So I just saw them as the characters they were, and we were cutting that film in my living room, in the valley, and so I just, and also we didn't have any. The studio didn't have Final Cut or anything, so it was just like we're going to make this movie, and if we like it, then we hope everyone else does, and of course that's great when you can do that and not have to rely on test screening results and so forth.
One thing I know that we've talked about here a lot when it comes to score is. Some composers seem to stray away from doing themes, but not you. You will do a theme to a character. You do it in this X-Men movie. In fact, there's even Hope. It's called Xavier's theme.
Yeah, I don't.
You do it in Kiss Kiss Bang Bang.
Well, I do it because I don't know how I need to establish something that I'm drawing from for the score. Otherwise, I would just be in a fog. I'd be lost. I wouldn't know where I'm going. I need to the character themes I write beforehand, so I know where the film's coming from and where the character is coming from, and it's not like every character walks in the room suddenly a theme plays. That'd be goofy. But I so when you say character theme, at least you mean you're creating some sort of thread for the audience to identify with either a storyline, a theme in the movie, not musical theme, but a theme for a thing that's
Concept
of the film, right?
Yeah.
And then the X-Men theme is basically for instance, for X-Men, is an overall thing that represents the whole world of the X-Men.
Was it easier for you to score this type of film, considering you worked already on X-Men 2?
Yeah, well, it wasn't.
Or did you have
I can't say it was easy because this was. I mean, if this had just been the next follow-up to X-Men 2 back in that time, I would have done the same kind of score as X-Men 2, very lyrical and traditional and so forth. But this was, the idea for this one was to do that, but also make it be more modern and to contend with the Nolan-esque kind of movies. So I think Bryan was a little paranoid about feeling too nostalgic because on Superman Returns we were very nostalgic for the '78 version, and we're kind of like in a rut in that movie because if we didn't do that we would have been fried by the
like crazy.
Exactly, and we believed in that movie so much, and
it's not bad if you're using that source material.
Yeah. So we had to do that, and and then so we were kind of in this. But anyway, so because of that, I think he was afraid of going back to the X-Men 2 theme because it's a past. But I kept saying that it's contextual. The film is new. The film is dark, and so it will update the theme by default. And I felt I was always pissed off that the other films didn't use that theme, so
Yeah.
I'm quite glad to have it back. And, you
I wanted
know,
to, you mentioned, if I may, just go back a little bit, because one of my questions too that I had was about Superman Returns, and it is such a love letter to the 1970, to the Richard Donner vision and,
Right.
and whatnot. And your score too is fantastic, where you use Williams a key, like you just put it in key points. But how hard was that to balance for you? Because you don't want to do. If you did a complete John Williams rehash, people would go, it's just the John
the Ken
Williams
Thorne
right.
thing. Yeah.
So how do you like interject yourself, and how hard was that to balance?
Well, I tell the story. At first, I was just paralyzed because I would get the death threats
Right.
on the internet, like, you know, if you don't use a John Williams theme, like I had not intended to, and then or why the hell are you scoring this movie, you know? And so when I went to start writing, I was just sort of like I was so paranoid about doing the wrong thing for other people, and then finally I just said, can I say fuck?
Fuck
it?
it?
Yeah. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
I said, because I do it all the time.
Yeah.
But I said, fuck it. I just have to like just look at this movie and pretend that that I wrote the Superman theme
Right.
as my well to draw from as the main theme of the film, and just score the movie like I normally would. And so that's what I did. And then the Superman score is so ingrained in my head. I never had to refer to any of the scores of his or anything, because it just came out.
That's great.
So I just scored it like I would a normal movie. And I think even Bryan was surprised how many little nods I did. But the frustrating thing is there's like 115 minutes of score in that film, and
Yeah.
I think some people think, oh, it was just basically a rehash of John Williams.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just sprinkled with that. But I mean, there's a lot of stuff I wrote, you know.
The jet sequence score is one that comes to mind.
Well, I guess
because
it's
you
a
do use
backhanded
that.
compliment too, because it blended so nicely. So
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
I
get to
think
do new
it's
themes
great.
like for Lex Luthor and so
Yeah,
forth.
no, it was great. Now, what do you have you always been like? Did you always enjoy scores like growing up watching movies?
That's
did you
all
go
I
out
listened
and
to. I was just a total freak.
Yeah,
as a
well-
kid. All I did is watch Star Trek and listen to film music, and
Yeah.
and then I wanted to expand upon that, so I went to Tower Records one day, and I asked the guy in the classical section, can you give me all the classical pieces that sound like film music? And
Yeah.
so he got me Holst the Planets and then Symphonia Antarctica by Vaughan Williams, and then the Ninth Symphony by Dvorak. And so then I would go watch those symphonies be performed at the San Jose Symphony, because I grew up in San Jose, and that's how I played the clarinet for years too, so I did read music, but I would just watch what I had known, and that's how I learned a lot.
What was your first score album? Do you remember? Walking into a tower of Musicland.
Oh,
or
that I
whatever?
bought?
Yeah, that you bought.
I mean, it had to have been Star Wars, but I can't remember specifically.
go.
'Cause,
For
you
me,
know,
it
I'm
was.
a
Yeah.
product of that,
Yeah.
where you're like,
I'm gonna switch gears because we got to get to the movie, and
Yeah.
I want to know more because I also want to hear about Jerry Goldsmith and the influence he had over you and stuff like that. But let's get into the movie. So
Yeah, I mean,
let's talk about it.
In terms of X-Men, how were you kind of introduced into the, universe? I mean, you're just kind of working with Bryan Singer and all that, kind of following along with him. But what's your kind of, I mean, with the comics, there's the TV series, there's, been the movies.
yeah, I didn't know anything about X-Men until we dove into X-Men, and
There
I
you go.
basically researched all the characters on the internet. Can't remember if it was Wikipedia back then, if that was even exist. I looked somewhere on the internet.
2000.
Yeah. But anyway, I researched them all, and what made them tick, and what their. Always have to know what the angst is of a character, because that's where I draw my stuff from. So, and then the character, that world is so great, and what it represents, of course, to especially a person who's gay, whatever. And then on top of that, the actors who are playing those roles, where we talk about McKellen and Patrick Stewart could just read the phone book, and you'd be like. Wow, so it just, for all those reasons, it makes it a really exciting place to be, and so it's just it inspired me.
Very cool. Now, sorry, my mic is just killing me. I can't hear you. I know in the booth they
We can
say
hear
it's
you.
good.
I can hear you.
I feel like I'm
Just
muted
talk.
for this whole thing. I know with this movie, Donner said like there's 40 years worth of material, but they really wanted to do Days of Future Past, and that they really wanted to kind of do what Nolan did with, you actually referenced it when you were talking earlier, where this would be like the Nolan's Dark Knight.
Right.
You know, it would be much darker, unlike where First Class was kind of like Batman Begins. You got to know the
Right,
characters.
right.
With this, you guys can get right into it. And it was Matthew Vaughn who said, you know, he loved it. One of the funniest things to me about the movie is the Kennedy assassination.
Right.
Because that was like, for them, a golden nugget of like, let's start on this piece of event. I mean, in terms of, you know, the way we kind of do things here, we start with the development. So, you know, what backstory can you give us in terms of the development, the conception of getting into this movie and, you know, taking it to be a sequel for 2 movies, essentially?
Well, my development really starts as pre-production is ending. I come on where we're starting to design, or the previous department has already begun designing some sequences that we're going to shoot later. Then I come on and start designing new ones with them and storyboarding big sequences that are to come.
Right.
And so that consumes the first part of arriving, and that never ends because we'll be shooting and getting floods of material for me to assemble, but at the same time I've got to be storyboarding sequences that for things we have to shoot later, and then animating those storyboards, the previs, of course, and then I even do sound and music on those, and do dialogue on top of the things, so that I'm like, here, shoot this, you know. But
Wow.
so that's because
So you're doing music as well as all that other stuff?
no, I'm not doing music yet. I
Okay,
mean,
I beg your pardon. I thought I
there's
understood
no chance in hell I could be writing any music at that point, because on top of the storyboarding of the sequences with the previous department and coming up with those animated things, while I'm trying to assemble the things that we're shooting, I'm missing parts, I'm missing beats, or I don't like certain things, and so Bryan gives me the authority to write a shot list out, and he basically tells the producers, whatever John wants, we're going to shoot somehow. So then it becomes, how do we shoot all this? And so I'll either go off with a splinter group, or I'll have second unit go shoot something, or we'll decide to have first unit go shoot something that I want, and then of course they'll see the shot list and they'll panic in the morning. They'll call me down at 6 in the morning when I've been working till 1, and you know, and so it's that kind of thing is it's pretty overwhelming.
You described editing this movie as a whack-a-mole kind
of
a project.
On top of all that, you got a time travel film
Right.
where, you know, like I said, it's whack them all. You whack one and you got another problem. And so that was an issue as we were shooting, and I have this vested interest more than anybody on the movie to make sure the film works, because I can't get back to LA and have a problem child because I got to write a score. And so my editor's cut is usually around the running time of the film, and I need to believe, even though it's never that way, but I need to believe that this cut is releasable. And the only way I'm going to get that cut when I return to LA and have my editor's cut is if when we're shooting, I have some sort of clairvoyance as to what's going to happen later and solve it now. And when that happened a few times on this film, where we'd shoot a scene and I'd be like, this doesn't make any sense. It's never going to be in the film. And so we'd actually shoot another scene in lieu of that, which is a huge expense, but not nearly the expense if we had to go back later. And in the small amount of pickups that we had to do on this film, we barely were able to get them because of actors' schedules, and so we never would have been able to get some of those sequences.
So if somebody were to come back to you and say, hey, I got this great time travel movie, I want you to, like, would you just say no? Right?
Well, first of all, I would say no to anybody who wants me to go edit a movie, except for Bryan, who makes me do it.
Right.
But so and then we get back, it's endless logic debates, and you have a lot of cooks in the kitchen, and a lot of my time was just exhaustively trying to create consensus.
Well, with Bryan,
rally everyone, say, okay, this is what we all believe, right? This is what we're on the same page, right? Okay. Before the chairman walks in, this is what we're all together on this, right? Okay, you know.
But because of your working relationship with the director, Bryan Singer, how much creative input and directorial kind of choices do you have in making films with him? Well,
I mean, we're creative partners, so I mean, it's trust factor over 20-something years. So if I say, you know, I really think we've blown it on this, I mean, he's going to listen to me, you know, and you know, vice versa. So it's you know, and you get that shorthand where, remember in that movie where we had that problem? Oh yeah, okay, well, we got this problem again, you know. So it allows him to, like a lot of directors, to go enjoy their lives while, you know, I destroy mine at an Avid, you know. I'd say the editors basically enable the lifestyle of their directors, you know, by destroying their own.
Do you have any examples from X-Men for this film that you made some big changes or scenes that you really had to like flip on their heads or anything?
Well, I mean, that one example of shooting a scene and then, and even though I bumped on it in the script, but you kind of like, oh, maybe it's going to be okay, but it wasn't. And it was a scene where Raven comes back. He's looking for Raven in the Cerebro, and it's kind of a funny moment, but where it goes just doesn't make sense, is where he's like looking for, and he goes, did you find her? He's like, he takes off the helmet, he goes, yeah, she's in the kitchen. And so they go in the room, and there she is. She's home, which is like, that's a cool idea. But then you're thinking as you're watching the scene, which was a terrible scene already, and it's god-awful location. It looked like it was like a $2 million movie, this kitchen scene, this kitchen set or house they found somewhere. But I was like, well, the movie's over. Why doesn't Logan just lock the doors and say, okay, you can't go anywhere. Okay, call me back to the future now. I've done my job. It's like, to me, where... It's like, what? So, and on top of that, this wasn't a great scene. So I'd like, she can never come back. He's got to contact her somewhere else, like in an airport. And then they wrote this whole airport scene. So that was probably the most crazy example, because to go shoot that scene was a big deal, And Bryan had to go to Fox and say, look, this doesn't work, so.
Many people have talked about that being a great scene, though, how he's talking to all these other characters,
and
then he
it
shows
turned out
up.
to be a great thing.
Fabulous
I love it.
So
Yeah,
it's interesting.
Yeah, and just threw that together really fast. I mean, Simon cranked that out, and they went and shot it. And so when I got the dailies back, I'm like, how the hell did they do all that? And they got these bit actors that were like really good. The stewardess lady, and and the woman sitting down. They're great.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a great scene.
It really is.
You look like you had.
Well, I was going to say, you're talking about time travel, and Bryan Singer had this conversation with James Cameron. Did you ever get like kind of notes about time travel and multi-universes from either one of them?
No, we gave the film to James Cameron when we basically had an editor's cut that had been around for a while, and he saw that, and I mean, maybe he hated it, but he actually said he loved it. So and he said he loved the cross-cutting between future and past, which of course was a constant battle with the studio, because they were always confused, like where are we now? I'm like, well, let's see, it's a lawn, and there's a robot that looks like it's kind of...
And Nixon.
Yeah, I would say we're in 1973.
They really had challenges with that? Okay, sorry, never mind. Sorry.
That says it all.
Wow.
And that became, I mean, that the third act was recut millions of times, because my original intercut was very...
ping pong.
It's back and forth and juxtapositions of shots that look just like each other back and forth, and it was sort of but it was just way too head exploding for people. So we kind of we stayed in future and past.
So did you change because I remember there was that one shot of Storm where it's kind of going up, and then cuts back to the Sentinel.
Yeah. That was one of that was an original holdover from one of the juxtapositions that I planned, because this was all prevised out. And storyboarded for these shots to sort of reflect each other. But so and it wasn't really it wasn't editorially jacking off. It was just sort of like really cool how it all
Yeah, and I took from that, because again, I thought those scenes were brilliant, because you were showing a parallel between the past, the future, and how those actions were happening simultaneously within that wormhole, so to speak. And I thought they were great. Who is this executive of Fox?
Well, I mean, it's that's just one executive. It's friends and family screenings, and and people react, and it's the 11 and 12-year-olds who are explaining the movie to the older people, and I'm not kidding.
No, I believe
it. We this happened on X-Men 2. We showed the film to a little private screening, and Tom Rothman stood up, who was the chairman of the studio at the time, and he's like, it's just like, people can be really baffled by this thing. It's really confusing. And his 11-year-old daughter stood up. She goes, Daddy, I understood the whole thing. So she stood up, and she proceeded to explain the alternate realities and what he's really seen and who's not there, and the whole movie. And then that was it. She diffused a journey of hell we could have gone down.
And she's now running Universal.
I mean, but. I was always like, where is this little girl?
You need to plant her in every screening.
We went around circles a lot, but even in the little tests we had, it was the little kids understood every little nuance. It's amazing.
Wow.
Because they have the willingness to believe, and they just let everything happen.
But they weren't confused by anything either. It's like and it's people our age or my age.
Well, I
They're
think,
lost.
yeah,
I
well, I
feel
think
like-
we're all kids at heart here. I mean, I wasn't finding it. No, I love those sequences and how they were done. And
Yeah, I feel like the younger generation can suspend their disbelief easier than the adults, because the adults
Yeah.
will go into a film and think all of the logistics of it.
Right,
and,
yeah.
And then they won't enjoy the experience as much as a young person would.
Yeah.
They look at it from different eyes, though. I mean, I come from the world of distribution and such, and they have what are called trade screenings. And trade screenings are basically set up for exhibitors. And exhibitors look at movies very boringly, I think, for the most part. There's a handful who get it, but for the
Yeah.
most part, they're looking about, am I going to put this in a 500-seat house,
course,
a 250-seat house? How long is this going to run for?
Yeah.
And there's usually very little reaction. Sometimes I hate going to those because there's no audience participation.
Well-
but yeah, and it
Well,
sounds
a lot of
studio
times
sense,
the
too.
marketing people at a studio can actually determine the fate of a movie
Yeah.
in the making of that movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to
Jack-
say any more on that?
Well, Jack the Giant Slayer was one. It started out to be it's kind of a dark movie, and which it should have remained as such. But the marketing people were like, oh, this has to be for every single person on Earth, from a toddler to a 90-year-old, and so we have to make it more colorful, and so we enhanced the color and made it more. And so then when you do that to a film, it sort of doesn't know what it is anymore.
Right, yeah.
But
Becomes nothing for nobody.
But by them saying that, it changed the making of the movie in post. You know.
Now, how about we'll go back to X-Men. We were talking again about studio involvement. How involved? I know you had a little issue back with this score for Halloween H2O, where a particular studio sort of kind of took things
Right.
out of your hands. If I'm misspeaking, you let me know. But in this movie, so in fact, the soundtrack was released as Portrait of Terror,
Right.
Inspired by H2O. It's a great soundtrack, by the way. But now going into X-Men Days of Future Past, Time's Up is the one track that
Right.
what I was reading about, and there were two versions. I call it a
Yeah.
bonus track. There were two versions on that.
Right.
One says film version.
Right.
Talk
So I
about
want everyone to
how
know on
that-
the album, okay, this was the
Right.
one I intended,
Right.
And then here's the one that everyone wanted. Well, it's and it's not. This was not really a case of studio interference at all.
Yeah.
It's just that this opening sequence is an action sequence. I wanted it to be unique and different, like the White House sequence in X2, because that was like, I wanted that scene to feel like more than an action sequence. So I struggled musically with that scene in X-Men 2 until the idea of the Mozart piece came with this amped up with anvils and snare drum Mozart piece, and so it makes it sort of this standalone special sequence, and that's what I wanted to do with the opening action sequence in this film, and I just couldn't figure out what that would be. I looked for classical pieces, that didn't work, and so then I thought, well, what if I do like a Carmina Burana kind of a gothic, malevolent kind of choir kind of piece, and so I did it and showed it to Bryan, and he was like, "That's cool, I think," because it was so different.
Right.
And so I went, recorded it. Everyone's jazzed, and I brought him down to watch that one scene, and he was like on board. But the great thing about working with star director is that, or someone who's basically looked at the godfather of this franchise, is we can just work together, and if we're happy, then the studio, in a way, doesn't have much of a choice, but we
Right.
do it. But we're very respectful of what they want, and we
Sure.
do it. But this particular scene was just kept insular, kept internal. So on the final playback of the film, the final playback of the sound, where we're done with the movie, studio sees it and they're like, "Whoa, this isn't like it was," because the temporary score was very typical, just action
Right.
music, and Bryan's like, "Yeah, maybe you're right," So then we threw up the temporary music on the stage, just a place that everyone's familiar with and comfortable with, and I knew the moment we did that I was screwed, but we were print mastering in 3 days.
Right.
Print mastering is where it's like shipped out the door.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, we had already shipped out the door for China and Vietnam, so they have the old version. But it was like the dolly and zoom out moment where I'm thinking, sure, I can have something on a recording stage and like 3 days. And,
Yeah, because once you get that
the day, and so anyway, so I was on a couch, laying on my orchestrator's couch for 48 hours, and I was saying, okay, so we wrote this thing, and we had actually, the funny story is we had no time to get the whole choir back, so I and my 2 orchestrator guys sang the choir for like 5 bars, so that's what's in the movie, and I have a video of it, so at some point I'm gonna put it on my website. It's hilarious, so we just multi-tracked ourselves.
Is temp love like a thing you face a lot of? Like is that the term, right? Temp love,
Temp love,
where people just fall in love with the temp score, and it's like you can't change it no matter what. It's like, no, but this is better.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sort of the fox in charge of the chicken coop a little bit on that when I'm the editor, because I create the temp score, so I'm my own worst enemy. But and then I get intimidated by my own temp score, and I'm like, I can't do better than this. But in this regard, I wanted to go 180 degrees. 'Cause I never really thought it was the right. I wanted to do something more. Anyway, so that's what happened. But on the day of our print master, we had a recording session, so it can't get it can't get closer than that, because we basically recorded that morning, mixed it that day, flew it over to the dub stage, and mixed it into the film, and like 2, 3 in the morning we were done. And,
I was gonna say those post guys at the studio must have been like,
oh
my
bricks.
head, like
Well, I remember when that conversation happened when we were watching the playback, and
Right.
the president of production's like, I don't think he can do that. So.
You just did.
crazy. So, has there ever been like, do you choose your battles? Have you ever like fought the good fight to say, you know what, this really should stay in, or do you just say, okay, whatever you say, we'll change? Or
it's pretty much hard for me to say, okay, whatever you say. I mean, because I especially when I'm the editor with Bryan on a film, because it's like we're a team, and I'm very passionate about giving up a year or 2 of my life, and if I'm going to do that, it's going to be something I want to be happy with, and it's, to me, it's like in the creative world, there is no right or wrong, but there actually is for me. And it's like, no, there's a right way and there's a wrong way, and if that's wrong, I'm going to fight for what I think is right. But,
So with X-Men, in terms of Jack and the Giant Slayer, you guys kind of had to. There was nothing else before that, so you kind of had to sculpt it for what it was. With X-Men, obviously, there's such a rich history, and so although you're beholden to, let's say, the studio, but you're more beholden to the fans. And so how do you kind of juggle that responsibility of, making sure, and Demetri has great, like, Easter eggs and things like that. Like, how do you know what to keep of, like, if we lose this, the fans will be absolutely pissed.
That was me. That was always my rationale for keeping something. Remember, the fans, because you want to, you got to try anything you can to convince them to do something, but I mean, but having said that, there was no they who weren't into what the fans wanted. I mean, I think everyone was very concerned about making them happy, and because we're all fans too, And then there was an apprentice editor in my editing room who was like the consummate authority on X-Men, so I'd go to him and go, how would you feel if we did this? He goes, oh my God, no, so it was great to have him around, and also the other guys in the office, they were all X-Men fans, so I mean, I think that's the main thing we take to heart, of course,
I mean, if I can applaud kind of everyone's efforts on the movie, Sarah and I saw it with our friend Roxy Stryer, who also does this every now and then, and she had never been introduced to the X-Men universe.
Oh, that's
never.
Good.
But she came out of that movie loving it, understood everything, and was like, I now have to see every movie that's come before this.
Can you email them for me? Because that was a concern. I mean, there was talk about having an opening sequence which shows Magneto, he controls metal. Mystique, she does this. No. And I'm like, no. It's like, you can't, you can't, but that was talked about,
I'm sure it was.
Because it was a concern, because they want this film to be
as broad as it can be.
Right. And so we really wanted to really bring in some fresh blood into the audience, But thank God that we didn't do that.
I love the humoristic moments where, like, there's the moment where Wolverine goes through the metal detector, but he's in the 70s and he didn't have his operation yet, and there's just that quick look. But anyone who has seen those movies beforehand would obviously get that joke.
Exactly,
so, like, what other kind of jokes did you say, hey, we have to have this kind of thing in so everyone could appreciate this?
Think of offhand.
But
We
besides
finally
that
stumped
one-
them.
It was like
Well, it's hard to think of jokes
Wolverine
that
that's, like,
specifically relate
Yeah.
to a fan knowledge. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, there's plenty of jokes in the film that I fought for that aren't fan based. They're just jokes, you know, or banter to keep character going. But
You gonna clean all that up? One of those, is that one of them? When
oh well, that no,
In the
that-
plane? What was
Hugh
that?
Jackman's awesome because he
this is when they're in the plane and
Yeah,
Magneto just
that's-
crushed the plane
that's
almost.
an ad lib from him.
No, was it really?
Because and then the Fassbender just plays along with it, you know.
Yeah.
And it's like I love those moments because Hugh Jackman completely understands his character so well and the script and the story. You can tell because we'll be doing a scene and he'll just come out with a line. I'm like, that shows me he really is keyed into what
Yeah.
the story's about. And in fact, sometimes he'd do an ad lib line after we've shot the other side of the scene, and the ad lib line's so good it means we got to have that character react to the line and bring the person back, you know. So
What a stroke of genius! Like you just go. We think our luck is. You had a great cast, and you know Patrick Stewart, Ian McKellen. You got great people in this, right? But Hugh Jackman, he's the linchpin. I mean, like
Yeah.
he's been in pretty much all of these movies in one way, shape, or form.
yeah.
How like do you guys just go? Thanks, Hugh. Like it's so great that the number one, he's a fan. I've
Yeah.
seen him do publicity like for all the movies, and like
Yeah.
he'll do something silly as put two forks in between and pose with kids, and
Yeah. Well,
You
first of
guys
all,
are
he's like the
so
nicest
lucky.
person
Yeah.
on earth. You could be some homeless bum on a street and corner him, and he'll probably talk to you for an hour. He's just that kind of guy.
Yeah.
You know? And he really cares about the movie from day one. And like I said, I'm repeating myself, but he's just into it. And he's also so affable. So as a character, it's just a blessing that he is like you said, the sort of thread throughout the film, because he's sort of he's the anchor.
Yeah.
For you feel comfortable with this character. you know?
in this day and age, to me, what I find amazing about that, it's rare that you'll find an actor who will want to continue to go on
Yeah.
playing, this one
Yeah.
character, but he always brings something new to it, and he doesn't seem to complain. I mean,
Well, I think
he
he's
loves
an
it.
egoless person who just, I think, despite that he's had a lot to do with his success because he's great, but I think he just feels I think I'm just speaking for him. I think
Yeah.
you can tell he feels very blessed to be
Yeah.
doing what he's doing, and I think he just never forgets that each day. And I that's my analysis of him, and so I think he's just thrilled to be doing what he's doing.
Liner notes from John Ottman.
Yeah, right.
But I think it's great also from everybody else that was involved. I mean, I really hate when things get recast, and it's so easy to do that. But even just like, Halle Berry in this movie, she didn't, in terms of story, she didn't really have too much to do.
Yeah.
But I still appreciated, like, seeing all the familiar faces of the past and, the new.
Yeah, well, that was one of the things going in we knew would be a challenge. There's so many characters.
That's what I thought was your biggest challenge. I mean, you'll
Apart from time,
time,
apart from time travel, you have to do
Yeah.
all
well,
this.
Yeah,
well, and
because
there was
how do
more
you give
for
them-
that. I mean, they did say things, but just
Yeah.
that we had to cut it out because
Yeah.
it's just. I mean, there's a lot of exposition to sort of establish the rules and what our plan is, la la la, and even the plan scene is like there's a whole nother part of that where then they all start talking and debating, and you're like, that's cool, but oh my god, I know that we just got to get on with it, It's like then she's got to take him to the room, put him on the table, and give him more rules. It's like, and so we just had to make that call where we just and. The negative of it is that we had to cut out any dialogue that these characters, a lot of them, like Blink and Bishop and Sunspot, had some things to say, But
what
they'll
was
be back.
amazing is you were able to keep some great character moments. I mean, throughout, you had McAvoy having a fabulous, finding hope again.
Well,
and you
then
have
the
all
whole
that
movie's
stuff.
about McAvoy's
Exactly.
character. I mean, it's Charles Xavier finding his hope. That's the whole movie.
Yeah.
And so that's why he got his own theme and so forth, which was fun to do. But yeah, he's great in the film. Yeah.
I thought it was a great balance in terms of all the characters and keeping at least enough in there to make all those character beats and arcs work and still have all the characters in it. Because I was looking at this going, how is he going to make this work?
Yeah, that's good. I mean, it's frustrating for me because I want to see more than myself, but I know that for the good of the film, we couldn't have done it.
Yeah.
For DVD, all that stuff, we
Yeah.
can see all that stuff.
There's another scene in particular too that many have said, and I think I believe we all agree here, the Quicksilver scene.
Right.
Okay.
Who would have
Just-
thought that? Because that was I wouldn't say it was a last-minute addition, but he wasn't in the script originally.
Okay.
And it was it used to be this guy who just jumped out of a plane and just went straight down to the
Burrowed in.
Pentagon and then just got him out, and so he was a late addition. So we were trying to previs that sequence when we were already overwhelmed with other scenes. It was the kitchen scene was the very last thing we shot. Shot that and left.
It was.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow. And and when we brought him into the script, there was this pressure. I mean, there's a whole lot of stuff that I don't pay attention to. Like, I didn't know Marvel was doing theirs and blah, blah, blah. But, Bryan knew that. It's like, they're doing theirs, and we got to make sure this is the most awesome thing ever, and it has to be fantastic. So we were, sitting there with the previs guy going, okay. And I can't say that the slow-mo thing was not an idea. It was the previs artist's concept. But we put that together very quickly and animated that, and then I can't take credit for the song, unfortunately.
Oh, that was my next question.
I would love to take credit for it, but the previous artist put that in, and I'm
Yeah.
like, that is perfect, but you never know if the song that's working on the animated version of the scene is going to ever translate to when we actually shoot it, because often that doesn't work. In fact, most times the music they put in the previs is terrible and does no relation to what it's ever going to be in the movie. But when I put the scene together editorially and put that song back on, I was hoping, and it worked great.
Yeah, and again, it's being touted or said about being one of the best action sequences
I know.
people have seen.
Well, and the funny thing
great.
is, it's not. If you really watch it, it's not really an action sequence
it's not,
because it's really a guy just walking through a hall with a tray.
Yeah.
And so it was really hard to, and there really wasn't, I would say, much of a plan for his journey throughout there and how he gets them out, and so a lot of the shots meant for the security cameras I actually used because there was very little coverage in the hallway where he comes out and the elevator opens and so forth. But so if you look at it, there's not a whole lot going on.
Right.
And so it's really about the music kind of giving this sort of like heisty feel and keeping the rhythm going and making you kind of amped up.
I would say give yourself some credit too, because I thought the editing too, and the way that works. Have you had the opportunity to see this movie with an audience?
Yeah, I haven't actually. I mean, just at the premiere. I went to the premiere.
Yeah,
but,
because when I saw this movie last week, and I saw it in like a prestige, large screen format, 3D, it looked amazing. But that scene, when it was done, just
applause.
Yeah, and
I know it's great. I mean, and we had applause even in our little internal screenings.
Yeah.
Friends and family, where it's just friends of the executives and family members. It
has to make you feel great.
Yeah, I mean, when I first saw his wig, I was like, oh my god, we're
How do I edit that out?
We're screwed. Bryan actually took me to the wig guy. John doesn't like the wig. I'm like, well, thanks for throwing me into the bus with the wig guy after we've already shot. There's nothing we could do about it now. It's like, so I'm sorry, I hate the wig. What am I supposed to see? What is he supposed to do now? But you know what? It's contextual. If you love the character, you love the wig. So.
Well, I'm with you. I didn't like it
I
either.
wasn't really affected by the wig. If I think about it really hard, I'm
but and here's the thing. I don't notice things like that because I know more in X-Men 2, people are complaining about Jean Grey's wig, and I'm like, she's wearing a wig? I would never know that. But so if I'm noticing a wig, but.
Yeah. What was it like working with the visual effects editors during that whole Quicksilver kitchen scene? Because there was a lot of heavy visual effects.
Yeah.
And that, where did you have to work with them a lot?
No.
Say, them do that, or
yeah, of
they
course.
Do their own work?
Well, no, because that sequence is like the editing really ends at one point because there's only so much I can do. I mean, basically, if the only editing in that slow-mo section is really getting him to run up on the wall, which the stunt guy can only do for a very small amount of time, and we slowed it down, of course, and so and then it just basically cutting together the character beats of that, but all the junk and the crap all around that's just something that I had to imagine, and then we sit down with the visual effects editor and we decide, okay, there's going to be a spoon here, there's going to be a pot over there, and then the visual effects team already has a plan in motion because of the previs that's been designed.
And they come in and fix them.
Yeah, but it can be a brain explosion because you just, for the longest time. Well, here's what's funny. Even before there was any stuff in there, and it's a green screen and like a pot on a bar back there and everything, it got applause on our test screenings, and I'm like, wow, they're not even seeing anything and they're loving it, because I think it's the idea
Right.
that they just respond to.
It is. I mean,
Well, it's quirky.
It's
It's
a great idea.
fun. It's not
Nothing
like you're-
we've seen.
Exactly.
But
Yeah.
it's like
And
before.
X-Men
a
is so
wedgie,
dark.
you're gonna get fans' reaction from that.
Yeah.
Like the simple, funny, physical humor in that,
Yeah.
and somewhat of a slapstick in
Right.
in and of itself in that scene
Yeah,
as well, which
And-
got big.
You know, I've never had the opportunity to ask like a director or an editor kind of this question. I think, you know, where we are kind of all involved in movies in one way, shape, or form. What is it like to edit in 3D and then also kind of with so many visual effects?
Actually, it's there's no. I would say there's not much difference in 3D, because I don't cut in 3D. I cut in 2D, and then after I've cut the scene together, I'll watch it in 3D and might make some adjustments for frames, because your eye takes a little bit longer to go from place to place, and then I put it back to 2D again, because it's just it's really doesn't really affect me much. Now the effects, it makes it much more difficult. I remember on Jack, we had this little cat in the room, you know, and a little cat toy would be in the frame, you know, and I'm like, well, we'll just erase the cat toy, you know, and oh no, you can't do that. Like, why? It's just like a simple, oh no, it's just in 3D. It's way too complicated. I'm like, of course, I've learned a lot since then that I was being a little hosed, okay? But and I'm like, wow, so we go and reshoot the cat, which is a nightmare, of course, you know, just for those moments where we couldn't take out the stick, you know.
Right.
Since then, I've learned they were just whining and didn't want to spend the time to put it back to put it in 2D and then do the effect and put it back in 3D again and convert it, you know. So, but it does make visual effects much more less easy to do. I mean, there's just a lot more complication.
In cinematography, you know,
Yeah.
from what I've learned, and yeah, I worked with the movie My Bloody Valentine.
Yeah, well, we shot all second
Okay.
unit in
Right.
2D, because
You did.
I didn't want the second unit guys to have their hands tied behind their back, because shooting 3D can be like walking through sand, you know.
Yeah.
And so all the stunt scenes or a lot of stuff I'd give second unit was converted, you know, which is another reason I didn't want to cut in 3D, because it was constantly popping between 2 and 3, 2 and
Right.
3, you know, until we converted.
Well, this movie looks fantastic in 3D.
I mean, yeah, I mean, it's like you would never know what was converted and what wasn't. So
No.
I'm thinking, do we really want to shoot in 3D anymore? It looks great, you know, but
yeah,
that's just me. I'm sure any 3D person has heard me say that horrified.
Well,
but-
we've talked about this here. Like, you know, 3D has come a long way, and it's
Yeah.
you know, I think I'm hoping that it's slowly gaining its ground again, because, you know, after movies like Clash of the Titans, which almost killed it. You know, it almost killed 3D. But it's such a great, like you yourself said, I like watching these movies in 3D, and I do too. Anything that gets the butts in seats and that gives you a different visceral experience, so long as the movie's good.
Yeah.
Today, the technology and digital technology has made 3D, like, now it's sharp. You know, theaters are finally getting on board by putting their light bulbs at that full luminosity so that it shines off screen. And X-Men looked fantastic. Dark scenes, light scenes, whatever. Yeah, it's a great way. I think today it's a great way to watch a movie like X-Men. It really rates. So
I'm curious, what are your favorite scenes in the movie, or like if you had any scenes that were really difficult to edit or that you found challenging? Like, what are your, I don't know.
My favorite scenes are always the character scenes between. I mean, you know, even though we're in the house a long time, it's when Logan is trying to convince a bitter Xavier.
Yeah.
And I love that scene, and it was a little bit longer before, but everyone's like, "Oh my God, we're in the house for too long!" Oh, you know, people are gonna run out of the theaters. You know, I'm like, oh, sorry about that, but it's a great scene, you know, and so those are my favorite moments, and the little nuances the actors will give, or will what's the word?
Ad
lib.
Ad-lib.
Yeah. And so and McAvoy did some ad lib in this, and that was one little micro battle I lost, because there's a couple ad libs he did, which you know, the peanut gallery didn't want, so we took them out. But they'll be back in, you know, little extended version to put all those little teeny things back.
So we can all see them.
Did you ever have challenges editing? Because editors also help with the story making of films. Did you have any challenges with editing any films of your past that you needed like another editor to come in and maybe give you suggestions?
I would never do that.
No?
I mean, I had a junior editor I brought on who became a partner of mine on this project. But instead of bringing another editor in from another movie to watch, that would be something the studio would want to do, but I wouldn't necessarily. I mean, I have so many people to bounce things off of in the editing room and so forth, and I'm I'm like, what do you think of this? And I mean, I've never done that before, but I don't know. Yeah.
Because we've done some films where that we've discussed before that like some editor has had another editor and like give their input into films. So I was just wondering if that ever happened.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say if the editor's a friend of mine, I'd bring them in to bounce
What if
things
someone
off
asked
of.
you? What if someone asked you to come in and give?
It's a weird thing. Well, I would come in and give my 2 cents. It's just very difficult as an editor to come in and watch something because again, you don't know what's under the hood. So all I could do as an editor even is aside from things that are egregiously horribly edited, would be the overall. Would be like, hey, I'm not getting this. This emotionally isn't working. But I mean, I would have to basically, if I came in as an editor to watch a thing, I'd be watching it as a director would watch something and respond.
As a speaking of under the hood, what are like some of your tricks as an editor sometimes like to get around certain problems? Like for example, I'll be where John and I edited our movie, we reuse a lot of shots just to make certain things work at certain times, or and especially in a time travel movie, there's a lot more leeway with that because sometimes people forget, like, oh, that might have been there. What are some of your techniques?
I mean, it's the techniques are basically just born out of desperation. So I don't know a specific technique, but like you said, I mean, there are shots that were repurposed for different reasons.
We've been there.
And those are the parts that are hard for me to watch because I'm seeing it as a Roger Corman moment where I'm looking at a reaction shot that was for some other scene, and and even the background was wrong, and I'm like, oh, really? So it's those things that when I watch the film drive me crazy. But there's a lot of finagling from.
But I know what it happens out of necessity, and so at this point, it's no secret that Rogue was basically cut out of that whole rescue moment. So I imagine a lot of creative cutting had to happen when that when you took that out.
Well, it's more like creative cutting, yes, but more like creative pickup shots because it wasn't. We all know that she was removed from this big rescue sequence, but the thing is, when she was rescued, she came back into that monastery and she switched places with Kitty. So for the rest of the movie, it's Rogue doing that. So to test this idea, first of all, before we went and reshot those little moments, was we did this Roger Rabbit thing where we animated a Kitty on top of Rogue because she used to be the one in that room, and Bobby wasn't there anymore because he died in the rescue sequence. So now I got a problem where I got Bobby. So then I had animated Bobby sitting next to her for the rest of the film just to see how this worked, and we kind of deemed, okay, it works. So now we're going to go surgically shoot any moment where Bobby would be seen or it would be Kitty instead of Rogue, and then so we had to reshoot all those little moments. So it's going to be a mind explosion if people ever see this restored because it's going to be Rogue back at the table and Kitty is on the floor. She's on the floor the rest of the film.
Minute-wise, what did that amount to?
It was probably like maybe not even 9 minutes.
That's a long time. 9 minutes. Like
that was the main reason
half
that
a reel.
It wasn't the time. The time wasn't the reason we took it out because films can be 3 hours and entertaining. It's just that from the realization in '73 that Raven's going to be in Washington and she's probably going to go get Trask there. This was stuck in the middle of that. So by the time we came back to them in Washington, you're like,
where are we?
What are we doing?
Happened?
Why are we here?
And
And we're on some lawn, and what So that was the problem. Is it just kept the focus of the mission diluted.
Detoured you.
Do you look at, as far as editing? I mean, again, we talk a lot about editing, and there is I always look at it as good editor will find a good rhythm to the film. Good, good pacing, rhythm.
Yeah.
Is there a similarity when you're composing as well? Like, a good score has a good rhythm through it, and it could heighten the film just as much as editing.
Yeah.
Is there actually a similarity, or am I
Well, I
making
think the
that
rhythm
up?
is internal with me because people are always really surprised to know that when I cut the movie, it's dry. There's no music in the movie at all.
Right.
Maybe for like one scene or two because there's a reason for that. First of all, when I'm cutting a scene together for the first time, the propensity is I'll put music in here, I can really sell it. But the problem is that you're masking you're masking a problem perhaps that could be occurring in the scene, and you're just going to delay the discovery of that till later, and it's going to blow up my face at the time I can't afford for it to blow up my face. So I need to have all problems exposed now. So when I get back, I watch the whole thing dry, and if I'm into it and I'm not recognizing egregious, or I've solved the problems already, then when I add the score, it's just going to heighten it. And then what I do is after I've assembled the editor's cut, then I do the temp. So now it's not like this hacked up, cobbled thing over months of cutting up this music that's been in there, and it's sort of so it gives it more of a, like you said, more of a rhythm that's less hacked up, you know.
Have you ever been in a situation, it could have been with X-Men Days of Future Past or any other movie that you've like edited, where you watched it dry and you're like, yeah, that, I call it sort of kind of like the Halloween thing, like where Carpenter showed Halloween without the music and people weren't in suspense at all. They said, what the hell is this? And then when he added score, people were like, wow, that's crazy.
Well,
like,
of course.
Do you ever watch a movie and go, this movie is, it's okay. And then when you do your story, you're like, wow, this is amazing.
Well, Valkyrie is an example of that, because Valkyrie, actually, my game plan was not to have hardly any music in that movie. What are we looking at?
Oh, we're looking at a time.
What
was the reason for that? Just because you wanted to?
Well, because I saw it as the opportunity, this raw reality thing where you're actually there, and I love doing sound design. I'm very involved in designing the sound of the film, because I don't cut to music, so all I have to do is sound design. Right. And I really get sound design is my reward. When I cut a sequence, I get to do all the sound, the ambiences, the computer stuff. I love doing all that stuff. So on Valkyrie, it was all about the teletype machines and the the rat-tat-tat and just the raw reality of being there in those rooms, and so that's what I really wanted the film to feel like, and it was working, but then you put music in, and you're like, whoa, and then once you light that fuse, you can't stop it. So it came wall to wall music, but what I did is I buried the score in with the machine, so it became like just a pulse you feel, and I think the on the dub stage, the mixers were surprised about the non-agenda I have with the score I've written, because I was like, no, the intention is to bury that in with the typewriters, to have it be just embedded,
Did you find Valkyrie as being a challenge, being, it's based off of true events, and the audience are, if they're educated enough, they know the outcome from the moment that before they buy their ticket. They know how this is going to end.
That's a massive feat, because first of all, you got old men in rooms talking a lot, and yet you got to feel like it's a suspense thriller. But the biggest challenge was, the bomb goes off halfway through the film, and it's done, and so you're like, so now you have to keep the audience on their seat after the bomb's gone off to see what the fallout that's going to be, and whether they get away with it or not, and that was a huge challenge musically and editorially.
Yeah, because we know that, again, going into it, we know that he didn't die from a bomb like that, and we know that Tom Cruise is going to die at the end. I mean, like you. Yeah,
everything that's going to happen. So how do you keep an audience in suspense for an outcome they already know? Yeah, and it was a huge challenge. But that's
how'd you get around it?
Well, I think the power of the story. It takes a lot of that away. I mean, the story's so good, and because after that bomb goes off, that's where very few people know what the hell went on about trying to take over the government and so forth, through basically charades, when the guy is not really dead, and it was music and editing, basically to get you wrapped up into something and be excited by it, and again, the story was so strong, I thought.
Yeah. Now you mentioned earlier that you played clarinet and also piano. Are there any other instruments?
No, never played piano.
No?
No, I wish I'd played the piano.
Oh, you wish. Are there any other instruments that you challenge yourself to incorporate into your writing, your composing?
I don't know if I challenge myself to use some instrument I haven't used before necessarily. I mean, I have my favorite instruments that I use. I mean, it's not too profound. I love the cello because it can do anything. It's from low to high, and it's so expressive. I don't write for much clarinet anymore, especially since woodwinds are kind of out in today's modern film music. You can't use any flutes or clarinets. So, but I enjoy writing for doing wild things with instruments that I could never play, because I know those guys out there are going to play it first time through amazingly, and it's sometimes I write something to see if I can slip them up, It's like, and so it's really fun to watch them try to play some of the stuff that I write,
Right, it's great because I my favorite track of this film is the Charles Xavier Hope, because there's
right.
beautiful piano
Right.
chords and all that, and I thought it was beautifully done.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
And I've listened to the soundtrack twice already, and it's so good because you're so good at building the music to this epic music in the end. It's just like every track is it's a slow build up to
Oh,
something.
good. Well, I'm glad I organized the cues right on the album.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that was my favorite theme because it was the first thing I wrote was the Charles theme. Because I had to be inspired by something, and I already knew this movie's about this guy, and so that I knew that if I couldn't come up with something for him, I was screwed. So, and then it becomes the thread through the movie. Yeah.
Beautiful.
I know you don't necessarily have the score in mind as you're editing, but do you have like a pinpoint of a specific scene of like this is where we got to get in a scene and like that's what this scene is
As I'm
held
cutting
upon?
a film, I'll create like a pregnant moment to know this is going to be a big dramatic moment for score, and not that I'm trying to accommodate the score, but I know that I'm going to draw things out of it because I'm going to make the scene feel more epic, and it's going to feel slow here a little bit, but I know the music's going to
Fill it.
But what that music's going to be,
You have
I
no
Like
don't
when the
have a clue.
stadium's going up, that's just
Yeah.
brilliant.
But I also have a tape recorder that I have by me all the time. So when I think of something, I whistle it in, and it's always like the typical thing. You're in the shower and sitting by in the bathroom or by my bedstand, and only because I'm so petrified while we're filming or editing the film that this thing I got to do, which is write the score. I'm so worried about it all the time. So to make myself feel better, I'll just whistle these random things in. And of course, the months later, I'll then refer to them when I'm ready to write. I'm like, what the hell was that? It's like it's mainly these awful ideas, but it made me feel better at the time.
So that thing's always looming because as
Always.
you're editing, you always
No,
oh my
the
God.
day when I'm on the plane flying to what we're going to
Yeah.
shoot,
Uh-huh.
I'm worried about it because I don't know how I'm going to do it because the film management never stops. So it's not like I can go, okay, well, I'm going to go write the score now, stop everything. You've got test screenings, you've got visual effects issues, you got ADR, the actors. You're constantly, especially with a film like this, you're kind of reorganizing things, and that never stops. So then they end up putting an Avid in my bedroom upstairs, so that's to lessen the number of times I have to drive to the editing room, and so I'll be upstairs dealing with cuts and running downstairs and writing, and
You mentioned test screening. Have you ever snuck into one as to listen to some of these people? I mean, there's been much said about test screenings. Some people thought that they hate it, they love it. There was a great little documentary on the Final Destination DVD about test screening.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and about the whole process and how the directors had to sit through this. Have you ever sat in during a test
Every
screening?
time.
And every time you sit back, and do you? Some of them, sometimes somebody can come up with something.
Yeah. Well, there could
Cool,
be.
and then other people
There could be a whole movie
Crazy.
made about test screenings, and
Yeah.
it's surreal because, I mean, I think test screenings are great to see how if everyone's universally confused by something, it was worth testing the film to know that. Or if they're universally not laughing at a joke, that's fine. But test screenings basically get abused, and they get abused by the producers and people on the film because everyone has their idea of what they want to put, and so they'll wait for those 3 comments out of 100, and then say, well, clearly everyone thought this because they said that, and then they'll manipulate the cards, and they'll have their own private analysis done to accommodate their agenda, and this becomes just an awful experience, and then you really got to take people. You got to not believe what people are telling you. The people with the agendas, and keep things in perspective.
My favorite at a test screening is, did everybody really like the movie? And about 100 hands come up or whatever, or you got your focus group. And then they proceed to trash the movie after they've already said that they liked it. It's
right.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
So how much of it do you take? How much of it do you take with a grain of salt? And then how did you go, well, that person actually is onto something? And
yeah, I mean, again, I think if there's just something that a majority of people are responding to, I'm gonna take that seriously. But when it becomes like 3 or 4 people, I mean,
completely subjective, and it's like, all right,
But having said that, one person could have an idea that I'm like, hey, that's a pretty good idea. So, I mean, or like any idiot. My mother can walk into the editing room and go, what if we do that? I'm like, that's a good idea, even though 90% of the other things she said will be ridiculous, and so you'll have these people that you're working with on the movie, and whether it's executive producers or so forth, and, and a bunch of their ideas might be idiotic, but they'll say one thing and you're like, oh, that's a good idea. But of course, unfortunately, that authorizes them to
give you all the other ideas.
Yeah, you know.
Okay, so for X-Men and X-Men's test screenings, was there anything that you were surprised about that people were really in love with or people were confused by?
Well, I wouldn't say we were surprised by the Quicksilver sequence, but we were
pleasantly like.
Well, yeah, I guess we were kind of surprised. I mean, not that we liked it ourselves, so it's not like we were surprised people liked it. I guess we were surprised at the degree of which people liked it, and actually him as a character, because we were really paranoid about that guy. When in the first scene in the basement where they come down and meet him, we reshot that. There was an original scene that we shot, which no one will ever see because it was bad, because we were trying to find him, as a character. Simon was writing-wise, and so then came up with a whole different dialogue for him that made him cooler, and reshot it so we could be introduced to this character and he's like a cooler guy. But what was the question again? Oh, things I was surprised by.
Yeah. Surprised, people were confused, but I mean, I think the Quicksilver one, I was expecting in a way.
I understood Quicksilver's because he's such a fast guy. He's doing a million things literally all at once. Yeah. So I kind of saw that he might have been a guy like ADHD kind of personality because he's doing a million things.
Right.
But I could understand his humor and his character. That stood out well.
How many times did they test screen? How many times did they test screen?
They must have done it like 12 times or something.
12 times or this.
But it's just internal. It's like, you make some changes and then let's watch it again. Let's watch it again. Let's watch it again. So after like the 12th time, you're like, it's feeling along now. Like, no kidding, you've seen it 12 times.
Well, but how about like in front of a live studio audience?
We almost did that.
Yeah.
And at the last second, so I was against it because I'm like, really? We're trying to keep all this stuff under wraps, and you're really gonna think we're gonna bring an outside audience in here? None of it's gonna get out.
Yeah.
And but no, powers that be, whoever wanted to do it. So I'm not blaming. It was just there's no particular person, but it was decided to do it.
Yeah.
And the audience is gathering. They're all in the theater. They're waiting, and suddenly we see on the internet people are saying, "I'm gonna go see X-Men tonight." On the Twitters and so forth. And so I went up to Bryan. I go, I just want you to know that 3 people already are saying they're about to see this movie. And he's like, shut it down. So when we claimed a technical error, and I felt bad for those people, but they waited for like an hour in there.
Yeah.
Well, because I know Falcon Jensen in particular was
we had taken that out.
Of the test screening?
Yeah. Even in the internal test screenings, because we had some friends and family coming, we took that out. So basically, he walks in, he looks to the office, and he sees Xavier. So we didn't have that in ever, screenings. Yeah.
I want to talk about Jennifer Lawrence's character Raven because it would have been so easy to make her kind of like a MacGuffin. Where she's just like, okay, here's this person we got to go for, but obviously with she's such a great actress and everyone's loved. How's finding the balance for her? And I saw you at an ArcLight interview and you kind of confirmed that she is like America's sweetheart. She really is who she is.
Well, we put together, not we actually, the assistants in the editing room put together like a 10-minute Jennifer Lawrence reel. It was done to Sexy Lady, and it was all the outtakes of her and how irreverent and crazy she is. And I'm like, if I were her agent or manager, I would demand everyone in the universe saw this thing because you just fall in love with her because you get to see her as she really is, which is exactly that, just down to earth, irreverent, crazy, hilarious person. We had to cut it down because she got a little rank in a lot of the things and mooning the camera and stuff like with her blue suit on. You're like, whoa! But so we cut it down to like 3 minutes, so that'll be on the DVD. But
nice.
But she's really. We had a really tough moment in the movie where. She has to make this decision with this gun,
right?
And which in the old storyline, we basically back engineered months later the storyline to accommodate the fact that she can't kill the guy, because the original storyline was she just can't get caught by him. And so her character, the entire movie, is hunting down this guy who's killed her friends, and I saw this coming like a million miles away, but so we go to shoot the scene with 400 extras out there, and she's got that moment, and she's like, why wouldn't I shoot him? Wait a minute. I've been hunting this guy down. I would blow his brains out, or I would shoot myself, because because the old storyline was simply She gets in his clutches, and they design Descendants of the Future based upon her mutation. Simple. But the problem is that moment becomes, you can't sell that moment. So we had to back engineer the story where she can't shoot the guy, because by shooting him, she changed the future in a bad way. So that's where we had to change it. But at that point, the script was different. And so then we had this complete meltdown. She's like, I feel terrible. I really feel bad. But, she goes, I barely graduated. I didn't go to college or something, she says. She goes, but I know that I would never do this, And so I'm like, gosh, she really, she's not just doing this for a paycheck. She understands her character. But then became the big, I called it the $350,000 or $400,000 writing meeting we had, because we're sitting there on our shooting day with all those extras sitting there. We're figuring this out.
Wow.
So we huddled, and McAvoy's like having this debate with her, saying, well, if you don't shoot him, my character is a disaster, because my whole character arc is to get you not to do that. She goes, yeah, but I wouldn't do it. So it became this back and forth, and finally, before we had even months later back engineered the story, we made her do it. She's, I'll do it. So she did it, and then we did an alternate version where she blows him away, which was cool and shocking. But then you can't have the future become what it became. And so we did both versions, and then for months we just struggled with how do we make this moment where the whole movie's headed to make some sort of sense. So.
Hey, Marisa, speaking of time travel, she and I were having a conversation just before you came regarding timeline. Yeah, and with you being here, maybe you have some insights on certain things.
My particular question, because from the X-Men Last Stand, we see Jean Grey kills Xavier and disintegrates his body.
Oh yeah, well,
and
whatever.
Then, but his consciousness still survives, but his body is still there in the future. And I was just wondering how with the whole time traveling, how that incorporates, and how does Xavier's body still exists in the future?
I don't think any of us know that. I think that we have to take him for his word. That line he has in the end of Wolverine,
There's speculation.
where he says we all have certain gifts, or whatever he says. I'm like, hey, good enough for me. Because I don't think it's so something you can't solve that we just sort of let you don't answer the question. Because you got to have him back, but everything else, the erasure of what happened in X3 makes sense now because the timeline's changed, all of what they did in Star Trek and so forth, which of course still drives me crazy. How could there not be a Vulcan and Spock's mother be dead? But anyway,
I'm not complaining that exact, because my favorite characters came back.
So
I'm happy.
Literally, no one has an answer to that.
How about the adamantium? The last time we saw Wolverine last summer, he was back to his old bones and skeletal structure as his claws, and now in this one, when we see him, he's got his adamantium back. Was there anything that was cut out, or was there anything, or you just said
we talked about it, and we're like, well, who knows what happened in the last 50 years or whatever, maybe Magneto helped him out or something. I don't know, but something happened where we got his adamantium back.
Now, did you choose in that scene? Did you choose the Star Trek episode Naked Time?
In fact,
that was you.
I made a fan out of our apprentice editor, because I said, okay, there's a Star Trek episode where Kirk says we're going backward in time.
Yep.
And I don't know I forgot what the name of it was. I forgot Naked Time was the name of the episode. He found it. He goes, it's Naked Time. I go, that's right. And I go, watch the episode. So he watched. He goes, oh, it's really cool. I go, well, let me give you a few more you can watch. So then he watched more episodes. And then he says, I realized he had never seen Star Trek 2. And I'm like, what?
Oh my God.
So he, I said, you're horrified when people haven't seen that film. And so he watched it and he goes, yeah, I loved it. So, because Star Trek 2 is sort of the template for Bryan and me for anything we
it was a template for X2, if I'm correct, right? Yeah. It was, I brought that up last week.
It's a source of inspiration.
Ralph Winter was the producer of
that's a coincidence, but it's just a well-written character movie. Yeah. And it's got such romance to it. So we just went to that as it's like, what would Jesus do? It's like, what would Star Trek 2 have done? And that was a lot of inspiration for that film. Yeah.
That's great, because as soon as I saw Star Trek pops up, I said, I was with my friends and I'm like, all right, that I'm loving this movie that much more now. And I go, of course there's a Star Trek reference. It's a time movie.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
That episode just popped into my head right away. I'm like, because those lines you just know. Yep. So yeah.
Great stuff.
But we had to re-edit the episode in the background because.
So I have one other question. So back in the public access days, when this was filming that, and this was sort of a trial by fire for you, where you were thrown into doing editing and composing.
Right.
Do you ever look back at those days now and go, what the hell was I thinking? Because now I'm locked into, whenever I work with this guy, he's going to make me do this.
I never would have known the blackmail would have continued to this day. But I mean, I came in late to public access. He had shot the whole thing, and it was cut by another editor. And then he basically he camped out outside my house one night. And I said, I'm 2 blocks away. I got to talk to you. So he came and basically threatens me. He'll
Acknowledge.
tell the same story, and say basically, you're never going to work in this town ever unless you recut my movie. And so I said, all right, I don't want to see what the original was, and just take it apart and let me start over. So I started over, and I had a full-time job, which is the whole reason I couldn't do the film in the first place, because the producers wouldn't let me edit a feature and work because there was no money. So anyway, so I did it, and then the composer fell out in the last moment, and we had a Sundance deadline. So I had been doing the music as a hobby, and I said, I know this character really well. I should score the film, and he was like, all right. So
you blackmailed him on that.
Oh, my one and only time. Yeah. So then people had singled out the score and the music, and so then we put the Usual Suspects together. I'm like, great, can't wait to score that movie. He goes, you're gonna cut the film too, and then basically, this is what happens to me.
Who is the name of this little composer that decides to kick the project to the curb back then?
No, it wasn't his decision. It just wasn't working. The music
okay.
was very sort of sinister, one-dimensional sinister, where there's more to a bad character.
Okay.
They're bad for a reason. There's something horrible in their past, and so I always try to bring in some romance to a bad character, like Kaiser Soze.
Yeah. That's
so
fantastic.
reluctant editor. So just because it's such a laborious process.
Well, first of all, it's the worst punishment you can put a human being through.
That's true.
I will
don't
have
debate
editors who will
that.
attest to this. But it's also, I could write 3 or 4 film scores in the time it takes me to edit one movie, and I could wake up in my bathrobe, and I could go to my keyboard and work for some hours. I can actually have a life, go to a dinner, and then I have a break after 2 or 3 months. I can make residuals, which editors don't make for some crazy reason. So there's but
really?
So there's a financial loss, actually, believe it or not, to go and edit a movie because I do have a scoring career. But I always say, in the old days, it used to be the composer would walk in the room and, the angels would sing. It's like, oh my God, it's the composer, and I lived in some of those days. But then the last 10 years or so, you're like as good as craft service, because producers are thinking, well, my neighbor's kid has GarageBand, and anybody can do this thing. And so you I feel like a grunt sometimes when I'm just a composer for hire, and I feel like I'm not able to have I'm impacting the movie as a composer, but I'm not helping make it. And so despite my complaints, I do get that need to be in control of the project, and which is great for like 2 months, and I'm over it. Then I got about 12 to go. And
exactly. So it's over a year for the editing process for you.
This movie was very accelerated. It was almost TV schedule, because we were supposed to come out with, when Planet of the Apes came out, and they flipped us. So we suddenly lost 3 months off our schedule. So we were very accelerated. But so it would have been over a year, but it was about a year on this one. Jack was 2 solid years of editing and designing, and because it was a very
effects,
very motion capture stuff.
And your scoring takes 2 to 3 months. Is that what you're saying?
If I'm just on as a composer, it can be anywhere from 3 or 4 weeks to 2 or 3 months. But this one I spread out my writing schedule because I'm going to be so interrupted all the time. So.
You're also you've directed as well. It was Urban Legends Final Cut, I believe. Okay, are you ever going to direct again? Did you like that experience?
I loved it.
It was a horror movie.
I loved it. I mean, I wouldn't normally do a horror movie, and I remember being offered that film, which I wasn't even looking to direct, because your life is funny that way. You go in intending to do one thing, and you end up doing something else, and then someone asks you to do that thing you went in for originally. I'm like, oh, you want me to direct a movie? And I'm like, well, cool. What is it? And they told me, and I'm like, oh, it's like when your grandmother gives you the polka dotted socks. You're like, oh, awesome, But I embraced it, and for what it was, it was number one, the box office and so forth, and that was my crossroads. It's like I was offered all these teen movies, and I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't want to be doing teen movies. And I felt like the scoring community had written me off, like, you're not one of us anymore. And I got kind of like, I was weirded out by that. And so I went back into the film scoring thing, and who knows what was the right decision, you know. But
Ever have any desire to do it again?
and I would love to do it again. And the problem, because just to get out of the room,
Right.
you know, and see people, and I loved working with actors, and I really loved the process of it. The problem is when I get in that mindset, I'm like, I'm going to go do something like that. It takes development time, and I'm
Right.
going down this road. I'm getting something going, and then Bryan comes along. Hey,
Yeah.
Right.
I got a big carrot for you to score a big movie, you know. And so I'm like, oh, okay, you know. So it's really my issue about having just to say no to something once in a while, and just going off and doing something on my own.
Speaking of being stuck in a room, this happened to me when I used to edit, where like you get to know the people on screen so well that when you meet them, you're like, oh, I know you, and they're like, who are you? Has that ever happened to you? Just
Well, you know what's funny is that when I was writing the score, you know, I'd go to bed at 2 or 3 in the morning, and to wind down, I just turn on the TV, and it was Star Trek's Next Generation. It would play in a loop on BBC America, you know, and so this happened like 3 or 4 months while I'm, you know, writing, and even though I was already working with Patrick as Xavier on our real shoot, and we went back for the reshoots. Now I've sort of, he's fresh in my mind, and I realize how that show would have collapsed without that guy, and he's everything about that show, and so it was weird. I was starstruck again, you know, and so I'd be like working with him, thinking, oh my God, I'm working with Patrick, with Picard, you know, and so it was weird, you know, just because I'd been watching that for so many months, and then I remember I had to take him. The poor guy was doing Waiting for Godot, and then we flew him to Montreal, and we had to get all of his stuff done in one day. So it was like, okay, go over here on this set. Okay, come over here and let's get screen screen. Okay, come over here and do this. You know, and this, you know, he's like 72 years old. Like, come on, you know. So then I had to get some ADR lines with him for a screening that were going to come up. We didn't have time to bring it in for ADR.
Oh wow!
So I needed to get some temp stuff. So I ran him over to the cafeteria, closed the doors, and put the microphone, you know, and he could have easily gotten really cranky, but no, he was getting a little perturbed by everything he had to go through, and he was tired. But still, it's just a great guy, you know.
Yeah, he's Captain Picard.
Yeah. But when you start seeing the crankiness come a little bit, you're like, oh, I don't want to see this. I don't want to see this side of this, you know, because it makes him like not Captain Picard anymore.
Has there
Or
ever been
Xavier.
an actor? This could be a tricky question, but has there ever been an actor,
a nameless actor? You don't have to name it.
I want a name.
Yeah.
Like that has like, you know, I think perhaps we've all had an experience where we really appreciate and respect somebody, and we're like, wow, this, you know, and then you meet the
them, they're an
person,
a-hole.
and the person's an a-hole on set throughout the entire thing, and
Yeah. If I had some real story, knowing me, I just tell it, but I don't. It actually hasn't happened for me.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. Yeah, no.
Well,
the
that's
friendship
good, but-
between between Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart.
That's awesome, because we had this kickoff dinner before the movie started. It was everyone back again at this giant dinner we had, and you know, all the actors from X-Men 2, and they're sitting together, and first of all, we're all saying, oh God, no one's changed a bit, you know, and first then you go look at a picture of yourself, like yeah, we have, but it's so cool to hear them just banter with each other and laugh like they're good old friends, and it was odd because it's like, not only am I watching Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen, I'm watching Magneto and Xavier, who are also sort of these pals, but on different sides, you know, and it's sort of like strange. It was just cool to watch them reminisce, and you know, because they go way back to acting school or something like that, and Patrick was always upset that Ian was getting the parts, and you know, and he claims this bitterness to this day that, you know, he got to be Gandalf and not him, you know, and so it's very funny, you know.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Marisa, you were
I was just gonna say, you've done a lot of, going back to the composing and music. You've done a lot of film, but have you ever considered, you know, composing music for video games? Whoa, hello. Like video games, like the next Halo series.
Well, you know, I started doing a video game. It was for Spider-Man, and I was a third of the way into it, and then they scrapped the movie. It was for the movie that they were going to be shooting, and then they canceled it, and so that was my foray into video games.
Speaking of Spider-Man,
But I haven't done any, I mean, yeah.
did you have any creative input into what scene was going to be used at the end of Amazing Spider-Man 2? Because in the promotional purposes, no.
You mean when we put that fight scene in there?
The teaser.
Yeah, now you guys remember.
Yeah, I was like,
making me feel.
No, because I was just this horrified period that we'd put some sort of hacked up scene at the end of any movie from our film, like, ugh, so I was like, whatever, I didn't want to even hear about it, don't even show it to me, so, no.
How about the button at the end of this movie going into Apocalypse?
Yeah, like what the hell is that?
Yeah.
I mean, that's okay. Now I don't care how many people are understanding the film as non-fans, but you got to see that as a non-fan and go, what in the world did I just look at? But it's such a fan thing, so I think that it was embraced by the fans because they get it. They can explain to their friends, oh, this is the Four Horsemen.
I was freaking out.
But were you really?
That's Steven in the booth.
Oh, okay, really? All right, great.
Marissa can attest to it.
Because I mean, I'm an X-Men fan, but not that deep, so I didn't know even who Apocalypse was, and I'm like, okay, and that was done really at the last nanosecond. The effects team had like no time to think about what it was going to be, because all we knew is we need to tag with Apocalypse. What's that going to be? And so we got the previous guys on. They just thought, what if this guy is doing this thing? So we're like, okay, but just to get that put together, I don't know how they did it so fast with all the animated people.
If this is common knowledge, I apologize as the group, but have they already approached you for Apocalypse? Are you guys on board with this?
I mean, it's I'm sort of a part of the Bryan formula, but there's not any sort of like, we're going to make a deal. So,
any other questions you guys have? I know we got to wrap you out soon. Which, by the way, Sarah, do you want to ask any? You've been kind of quiet for a little bit.
I've just been listening, absorbing, doing all this stuff. No, but I think it's so fascinating to me, composing, because it's something I was involved in music, but I cannot wrap my mind around how you create this like new individual score. Because for me, whenever I'm thinking about music, I always get inspired by other songs, by other movies. So how do you keep it like fresh and that you're not pulling from other people and keep your mind like open, like a blank slate?
I think every composer said that, the fear is every time you start a film, it's the one you're not going to be able to think of anything, And Danny Elfman says that. It's something like his analogy where you go down to the well and then there's nothing there this time. But I don't know what, it's just out of sheer panic something comes because it has to, and I live based upon a calendar on the wall and a recording date, and I'm like, okay, today I'm screwed if I don't write something. I don't know what it is. I mean, it's like I guess because there's so many things in your head that you like when you have a dream, it's all based upon shit that's in your head. It's the same thing when you're writing something. When I see something in my head pops related to something that's already in there, and it gets rejiggered around and comes out in some other way, And then also when you're temporarily putting the music in the movie, that sort of becomes a roadmap or a guide.
How much do you write that doesn't get included? Like how many, like you worked on Xavier's themes, like how many versions of that are there? Like,
well, there's lots of iterations that privately I just throw in the trash or put delete Control X or whatever it's Control Z, Control X. And so there's probably countless versions of stuff that I don't like, or I'll come back the next morning and go, that's crap, or, and so. But in terms of actually something that was written and recorded, there's not a huge amount of stuff, but there's probably a good 6 or 7 minutes on this movie that I did as alternate versions of things, and well, there's probably more considering that one scene that was redone. That's 5. So maybe like 10 minutes of music here that we did as alternate. I did as alternate ideas just to cover my ass.
Is there another X-Men character that you would love to compose a theme for?
I'm ashamed to say that I'm only a fan of the X-Men characters that are in the movie I'm working on, because I don't know the franchise enough, or I don't read the comic books to know what these other. All I know is, they've already said that Gambit is going to be in the next movie, and I've never heard the end of Gambit. We're making X-Men 2. Got to have Gambit. It's like people are always talking about this guy Gambit. So I guess if he has a major storyline, maybe he'll have his own theme. I have no idea.
Very cool. Well, thank you for joining us, John.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure. You mentioned earlier that your website, you want to give it a quick plug?
Oh,
It's a great website.
I'm not sure one is not quite done yet, but it's john@johnottman.com. I try to sort of, on every page, remember my experiences and then give the G-rated or the version I can actually tell as a sort of memory of my experience. I put photos and everything, but I've been delinquent on the last few projects, but I'll try to get around to them. Yeah.
No,
Fair.
it's a great website. Well, one silly question I purchase a lot of soundtracks. Many of them, a majority of them. Well, why isn't the movie? Why aren't the music tracks in order of appearance in the movie?
Well,
like
because
how does that happen?
Fucking boring, because a lot of times if it's in movie order, it's every cue. It's not a listening experience that'll be interesting, and then that's why a lot of stuff is cut out. I mean, there's 150 minutes I did for this movie, and it's a long album. It's like 70 something minutes on there, but there's about 36 minutes missing on the album. Which brings me to the whole another soapbox issue. I don't get that.
Fair enough.
People basically judge a score on an album based upon the album. And this score sucks. This score is good. Based upon what? An album you're listening to? How do you know if it even works in the movie or not?
Yeah.
Because I've heard lots of fun music on albums, and I watch the film like, oh, it's just terrible.
See,
so
it's so.
it
Wow,
really
it's
irks me
crazy.
when people review the score. Review the album. Okay, as an album, this sucks, or this is good, but don't review the score until you see the movie. In fact, I was really hoping this CD was going to be delayed, so that people could only hear it after they saw the film, because then they're relating to what helped.
It's rare that I do it, but I did pre-purchase this prior to the movie. We knew you were coming in, but no, to me, I will see the movie if the music is fascinating and interesting to me and it tells the story. That's when I get the soundtrack, so I can revisit the movie again, because the music to me tells the story. And it's on many occasions you'll find me. I can be on my balcony, have a nice fine glass of scotch and a cigar, listening to a soundtrack and reliving the movie again in the moment. So
I think it's a fringe benefit if the score alone is fun to listen to without the film, but the job for me is to make the film work.
Right.
And if the most profound thing in the world is like a wah 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 wah, and it worked great in the movie, that's what I'm going to do.
Can I ask one question? Sorry, from voice from the booth. Are there any like scores that you've heard that if I played it for you right now, you would just go back to that time when you first saw that scene? Like for me, I would say Unbreakable. I see the pool scene with the music in that movie. Like, what's like your favorite go back to nostalgic moment song?
Oh boy.
Or your top three. What comes to mind? Just whatever comes to mind.
Wow. For some reason, what pops into my head, which is not a very good example, is the Jawas music in Star Wars. I don't know why. It's like that little scene. It's like this really. It's this piece of music, which John Williams is brilliant at. It's a piece of music, and yet it's underscoring a moment.
What quick advice would you give to anyone who wants to be a film composer? Just real quickly, what would you tell them?
Don't.
Aside from that, okay. Well, the advice I give is actually really sounds lame, but it's true because people don't really. It's basically I always guess it's for anything, not just music. It's basically do. It's because the lamest, dumbest project you get could be the one that leads you somewhere where you least expect, and it also teaches you to have a good attitude about the things you work on. Because even to this day, I'll get some shitty film, and I have to delude myself that it's going to be a great movie when I'm done with it, and only until I see it on TV 2 years later I realize it did suck. But I think that if you have that attitude early on, it's going to help you not only stay that way as you work, but the more things you do, and as life is, you end up doing what you least expect.
All right, so Steven,
leave it on that.
Steven, keep the music going. Get the camera. Why don't we take a quick photo, let you on out of here, and then we'll give our final thoughts on X-Men Days of Future Past.
Thank you.
Boy, that film sucked. Glad he's gone.
Now we can really talk about the film. Thank you.
Steven, get the camera. We're going to take a photo. We're going to keep the podcast going, keep that music going, lower our mics, let the fans enjoy the score of John Ottman.
Oh, man. Thank you so much.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen,
That
for...
was a great time to have John back in there. That was terrific. I'm glad he came. I'm so appreciative. It was great insight.
He's wonderful, though. He
Yeah.
also so talked about, obviously.
Hope
I
he-
didn't realize how ingrained he was in like the Bryan Singer partnership. I know they worked together for so long, but he really does have a lot of creative input.
Yeah.
And
You have
Brian
to... I mean... What he said was so true. When as an editor, you're in that room, and so
Oh my
you're
God.
giving your director your life. So
It
you know
is,
what,
yeah.
Brian better be appreciative.
Better. Yeah, exactly.
We lost Demetri for a moment. We lost Sarah for a marisa as they walk out. John for...
Sarah.
I'm
Oh,
here.
that's right.
But I
That's right.
mean,
They're-
I can leave.
they're escorting John out. But,
So there's, we won't go too much longer. Obviously we've talked about amazing stuff, but we just want to kind of talk about some other stuff that perhaps we didn't necessarily hit
Right.
while we had John, because his stories.
yeah,
were
I'm just so impressed
amazing.
with the volume of work he does doing both of those duties, editing and composing. It's just crazy.
The amount of time and dedication to a project. But I mean, it turned out incredibly well.
Yeah.
I think overall, like I'm an X-Men fan. I'm not like a crazy X-Men fan to the point that the end scene didn't make complete sense to me. I had to like look things up. But I watched
the apocalypse.
Yeah,
Okay,
like
beg your pardon.
like I'm not as knowledgeable to know that.
Right.
But I've watched all the movies many times, and I think that this one really lived up to the standard X-Men has. I think that balancing all of the very powerful and dynamic actors is a huge challenge that they did very well, and that's difficult. Like so many people were like, oh well, now this is going to be Jennifer Lawrence's movie, and how they really did, like they focused on Wolverine, they did use
They had great
Mystique,
balance.
but then they also did the two versions of Xavier and Professor X, and I thought that the character use of almost all of them was done really, really well.
Yeah, and the original story of the comics was written by John Byrne and Chris Claremont, and Chris in particular was a very big story consultant for this movie. And I mean, obviously, John kind of talked about all the rewrites and things of that nature, and all the different consultants on it. Yeah. And when you talk about a universe like this, you have to have as many good people thinking about it.
What I loved so much about this was, unlike the other movies that we've seen, meaning Spider-Man 2 first of all, took the time to do those character beats. They had a much richer plot, character development, arc, all that kind of stuff going in. So it made it way more than just.
Well, let me ask you this. In terms of that, even right, I know with Amazing Spider-Man in particular, we talked about Jamie Foxx's character, and this, they've really made Peter Dinklage's Trask character the main villain, the focus. Right. And how did you guys, did you guys feel that even to me, he felt very fleshed out?
He did, but he is. But you also had all these opponent allies. Let's face it, Magneto is a great opponent ally because he's an ally.
That's the sound. Sorry, John. That's the sounds of Demetri coming back.
Yes,
for those
Demetri,
of you,
welcome back.
Yeah.
So even though Peter Dinklage's character Trask was obviously the villain in this, and the one the major story with Raven, anyways, that she wants to kill him. You also had the other part of this, which is the internal fight between the X-Men, which is the ongoing battle that they always have. So you can maintain that antagonism and have that conflict be part of the narrative, which I thought was great.
Well, to me, like, to speak for Peter Dinklage and for that character, what I find so fascinating is that they can revisit any character in the next one, and it will I still feel like there's more. Like, a lot of times I feel like you see a superhero movie and there's a villain, and you really can only see them in that one movie. Like, they have their arc is complete. Like, there's nothing more. For Peter Dinklage, like, he could come back. I could see what he would do.
Stryker. Stryker. How many times does he keep coming back?
As a different actor. Absolutely.
But they flesh out their character so much that they have a life, and it's not just this one chapter that they're involved in. Like, you can revisit, you can intertwine, because all of the actors take so much on.
Well, speaking of in terms of his character, in terms of there was a deviation from the comic books because it was originally supposed to be Senator Robert Kelly, but as we know, that's X1, X2 territory.
Yeah, but I just love how. Let's see, we're not gonna deal with Xavier being torn to shreds. We're just gonna.
I'm just
gonna ignore.
What I will give out is that, like, I feel like a lot of fans are willing to stretch it for them.
Forgive
like,
that.
Yeah, and they are willing to say like, oh, well, maybe if X like went in his twin brother's body's conscious.
Well, I thought for sure because they had the whole thing with the McAvoy Xavier being able to walk, and that's because he's got the serum that Beast put together. You know, it takes away his powers, but it allows him, to overcome the injury that he has. I thought they answered that really nicely, and I'm going, oh, good. Then they're gonna have. I figured they would answer the other one because I go, okay, how is he part of this? Did I miss a movie? How did Xavier live?
The other crazy thing that happens though at the end is with Stryker, who is
Mystique.
Mystique. It's clearly, and that changes everything too, because he's not being captured by Stryker, and he's not. The whole Stryker involvement is about him getting his adamantium blades, and he's and now we find out that that's Mystique, and that changes a lot as well. It's just crazy, but we buy it. I don't know what it's going to do in the future movies, and how does Stryker continue to be involved.
But did it bother anybody else? I mean, you were kind of, obviously you were a little bit, but Marisa more so, I would guess, that Xavier's torn to shreds, and all of a sudden he's back and completely intact, and there's no specific...
I just questioned it because I was a big fan of the X-Men Last Stand, and then a lot of things happen in that film, and everyone who's going to watch this film is going to go back to those and watch that and have those same questions. And we know from the end of X-Men Last Stand, Xavier's conscious still survives.
Consciousness, yeah.
Yeah, but how does
his
body how does that still exist?
There's a few theories from the comic books and from the fans putting together. One of them is that they tease it in Last Stand, where he says that your consciousness can still survive and inhibit another body, and
inhabit
another body.
But his body was destroyed.
There is hints to things in the comic books that Xavier has a twin brother who is comatose. And his consciousness entered his comatose twin brother's body. But there's also things.
Body also.
That's the thing. They're like, why is he paralyzed still? Is kind of the question.
And it's trying to, and I apologize for that sound mishap on my part. But there is an article that talks about all the different things and how it affects. And one thing it says is Days of Future Past wiped the X-Men series almost like a blank slate.
Yeah.
But what did happen in those first 3 movies? Clearly, the Phoenix Force did not sees Jean as it did in the third film. And I think everything really sort of kind of gravitates to that third film.
Yeah.
And we talked about it even before doing this, that part of the plot line in this was to retcon that third film completely.
Yeah, to erase it.
Just to erase it from the history. And again, one of the things it just says here, it's also unclear as to whether Stryker, the antagonist in the second film, is even a factor in the modern day. Is this even a world that hates and fears mutants at all? Is Magneto still a threat? Is he still alive? I mean, it does a lot of things. But
it erases everything, and that's honestly fine with. I still have the movies to enjoy for when I want to enjoy them, and just gives more opportunity.
Yeah.
So it doesn't bother me too much.
Yeah, it doesn't bother me. It didn't bother me. Marisa and I had a really heavy conversation about these things, and I get it if you're a fan, but to me, I was like, so long as anything that retcons that third movie, I'm like, I'm happy with. I'll just buy.
Jean Grey is alive. I'm happy.
Oh, yeah.
Well, but I really like the theory that Magneto is the one to bond the adamantium to Wolverine now. I love that theory because I think that as them teaming up, because Wolverine's always kind of been a chaotic, neutral character, that would be amazing. And then I like also, since this wipes the slate clean for Wolverine Origins, Deadpool has a chance to have his own movie now without having to have that weighed against him.
Okay. And you're talking about the Wolverine Origins movie.
Gambit's going to come first, though.
Yeah, but Deadpool's a huge Marvel character that they kind of ruined with that movie. So giving the option for that is amazing.
And they're also saying that this movie sort of kind of retconned the Origins Wolverine movie, not necessarily the last Wolverine movie.
I mean, here's ultimately right. Hank McCoy has that line about you throw a stone in the water, but the current eventually is still going to take. So I think what it does nicely is it fixes the old problems, but you can still have it where certain things still continue and kind of
reemerge.
Reemerge, yeah.
Yes.
I kind of saw it like history repeating itself as well, because especially during the whole fight sequences near the end, where they're fighting in the future and they're fighting in the past, but it shows that even though you're going back to the past to righting the wrongs in the future, history still repeats itself. It is a cyclical thing.
Yeah, but I mean,
They just created more opportunity for themselves, and that's, to me, the bottom line, is that they just created space to keep living these stories and to expand.
It also, but the other thing that I was thinking is, you've just created this idea that you can send people back in time 40 years or whatever. Really? So let's send them back even farther to right a few more wrongs. Are you going to do that? Because you've opened up that vortex.
Right.
Now you can't do that.
That is true.
I mean, if you have the ability to do that, why don't you write more wrongs?
There are a few other story arcs that involve that. Just
Okay.
heads up.
There you go.
Yeah, and that would be as far as cinematic, like if from a movie standpoint, how many times do you want to go back to that?
I know
well
that's my. I
you
don't
know.
think you would, but I mean,
Yeah.
you just open that up, and then every time you don't do
But you
it,
did only
say,
open
"Well,
up through, like, basically one mutant. Like, they have to establish her again, and I guess wait for her to be born. Because if you're talking about Kitty and like how she can transport someone's consciousness, she's pictured as a young girl at the. How do you talk?
She's
about
talking
this?
about. She's talking about basically. It
And
was.
that plot line. You have to have Kitty. She has to exist. She has
but
to be
doesn't
part.
she already? I mean, she does.
No, but you
But
can't.
not where we've like
You can't.
basically backed up to.
She's not existent in that time period.
No, she is, but I mean, I'm talking about how they've created this window that
This
now
is why the
of
whack-a-mole
history.
theory comes in. It's like,
Right.
what the hell are you talking?
Well, I'm surprised. Like, it's great that they got, to get Cameron involved, or going to him is great. One question that I was remiss that I didn't get to ask is, did anybody think of contacting Bob Gale and Robert Zemeckis, or did you have the Back to the Future script going on? It's tough when you do a time travel movie. We've talked about it here, and there are rules, and I think where this movie succeeds is it puts the concept out there, and it makes it understandable. And it sets up its own rules, and it tells you them from great exposition, and it tells you this is how we can do this, and this is what's going to happen, and they don't fall into the they don't fall into the time continuum kind of paradox. It's great to have Xavier talk to Xavier, but they do it in a way that they're not occupying the same space. And so that's where I thought that this movie was so clever in handling its time travel thing. And
they did set up rules. Like, it had to
Absolutely.
be, I mean, they made it so it had to be Wolverine,
Yep.
and he's the only one who can survive this. And they made it so it's contingent upon her.
Yep.
So there are rules that, to me, make it so it would be difficult to make them go back anytime, all the time.
Well, Xavier did it. He went forward to talk to himself.
Right.
But through the
he
mind
had
of
to do
Wolverine.
it through Wolverine, who was present in both.
What do you guys think? What do you guys think of this? Obviously, it's a great choice to have
Rules that
Wolverine.
are fast and loose.
It's obviously great to have Wolverine do this because I mean, as we talked about, this whole thing it's on his back. But a few deviations from the original comic, Kitty Pryde is not the one she's the one who actually does this in the comics, and it's Rachel Summers who has this ability to even do that. Did anyone find that off-putting? Because I had known as Kitty Pryde as just this person who walks through walls, and it's made no mention of that.
I questioned because I didn't know Kitty Pryde had the ability to project other people's consciousness in the future, in the history. So I didn't know if that was true to her character. Because you'd think Jean Grey would be able to do that.
Yeah, but you have this character who can project yourself through
Jean
three
Grey.
dimensions. Why not other dimensions? So, I mean, it's to me, it's an extension of what she does already.
But and then if you also go off of the film, we see in The Last Stand, we see Kitty Pryde is in Xavier's class when he's talking about transporting people's consciousness from one body to another. So it would make sense that Kitty, being a pupil of Xavier, would know how to be able to do this, execute consciousness.
I sort of kind of want to see, I understand what they're saying. I want to see that cut part from the movie, that excised part now. I understand the rogue part and Kitty,
Well, here's what
So-
what it did was it negated the ticking time bomb.
Yeah.
Because then, you can just continue with that part of it, and ultimately they can perhaps save themselves.
I mean, for me, I heard debate about this also. There was a couple people saying that it was kind of very Hollywood for them to try and replace the leading female role with a male. Because if it stuck to the comics, it would have been Kitty Pryde going back, and it was sort of focused on her and not Wolverine. That, to me, doesn't bother me as much because they have so many people to deal with, and we love so many of these characters that you have to be able to, I guess, have a knowledge, have a base, have something to connect to.
Sure.
And if they had used Kitty Pryde going back, although we all love Ellen Page, like, we don't know as much about that character, and to have her be the anchor of this film and convincing everyone, I think would have been harder and would have needed more explanation to an already complicated movie.
But the bottom line in all of these movies, with the exception of First Class, Wolverine's the focal point. He's the one through which, you know, the audience has been traveling with since the first X-Men. You know, we follow him through there and getting involved with the X-Men, and where he Anna Paquin, who's Rogue. You know, and then X2 is really, you know, again, it furthers him. And then in X3, again, more with the Stryker character. Yes, we have all these characters coming in. The only movie that Wolverine really didn't impact as much was First Class. He was only in it for that cameo. But what's great about it is that line, that one scene, they use it in this one. But I think it's smart from a cinematic perspective. They picked a character, and they've thus far run
smart
with
from
that.
a business perspective.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
Hugh Jackman is huge around the world.
Yeah, and he is now. And again, I just recently watched the first movie. It was funny when he said, "Oh, everybody looks the same," and I'm like, when I see the first movie that came out in 2000, man, Hugh Jackman looked. I mean, it's just crazy how young he really looked it, but he's weathered it well. And again, he, you know, much props to him for sticking around, because a lot of people might not have. And, you know, he's a great through line, and he's a great supporter.
And also, I thought a big story for this particular film with the use of Mystique and her mutation, and that she's able to transform, which also helps with the Sentinels, because the whole Sentinels and X-Men, they have like different generations of Sentinels, and like the one that's used in this has evolved over time and has aided with the brink of extinction of these mutants. So I liked how they played with Mystique's mutation into the storyline as well, and made me question, because Jennifer Lawrence, her career has blossomed tremendously in the last few years, so it made me question if they helped build her storyline because she's such a big actress now today, that it would appeal to the audience as well during this time.
I mean, my gut tells me that probably, but I'm glad that she didn't take over as the focal point over Wolverine, because I was a little worried that could have been kind of more of the arc, that she was really going to be the star. And for me, like, Mystique as a character is always interesting to watch in all the other movies, but she's never been like the star of it. And I am glad that they both gave her character more, gave her more depth, and like gave Jennifer Lawrence some opportunity, but they didn't let it take over the entire franchise.
Well, they're great because they work on multiple levels. Because I mean, as soon as they meet up, right, which you know is going to happen, all of a sudden Michael Fassbender, Magneto, just turns and is like, "I am ensuring mutants."
Yeah, I was like, "What?"
That movement came out of nowhere.
What's that? Oh,
that moment,
his decision to shoot her and stuff like that.
I think
I was not. I was like,
I wasn't
not
expecting it, but I was not expecting it,
I
but I
was.
didn't think
It
it
got
was.
me.
It got me. It got me, and I was like, wait, when does she jump out the window? Because I remember seeing that frame in the trailer, and I was like, I'm confused how this happens. And then he like whipped out and basically turned on her, and I was like, oh, now I get it.
Yeah.
But that was a great moment. Great turn.
And that, you know, that was also a great opportunity to kind of take us back to the future, or whatever you want to call it, because, you know, of Wolverine's interruptions.
Yeah.
Did you guys ever get pulled out of the movie by like the time changes?
No.
That he
In fact,
mentioned?
what John was mentioning, in the third act, I was wondering why they didn't cut back more frequently, and therefore he explained it. And I was, because I had the same inclination he did. I was like, I'm surprising they're not intercutting a little quicker.
Well, there's your answer. They wanted to.
They wanted, he certainly wanted to. But
The only time I ever got pulled out of this movie was completely based on my own brain switching things. I'm like slightly dyslexic. And when they were pulling out the Sentinels, instead of it saying Trask, I read it as Stark. And I was like, Stark? And I was like, for like 3 minutes, I was like, wait, what's going on? I'm
Iron Man's in
are these colliding? And like I heard a little bit about the Quicksilver thing, and I was like, so confused. And then I was like, oh, Trask.
To be fair, Iron Man
Got
was
it.
the first superhero that they encounter that is not a mutant
Mm-hmm.
in the comic books.
There you
So
go.
you are correct in some sort of way.
My subconscious
movie.
was telling me. I was so. That
How
was the
awesome
only
would
confusion.
that have been if Stark Industries was involved with the X-Men weaponry?
It
Due
would've
to
been-
contract negotiation, I don't think that's going to happen.
I don't think. Yeah, I don't think we're
They
gonna.
really
see that.
like their divisions.
Yeah, they had
I mean,
a contract
so
negotiation to
confused.
get
Well, I think
Quicksilver
it's.
in.
I think it's the way we say contract negotiations because a lot has been said lately too, regarding the Disney Marvel deal, and so right now it's just a question of when Sony and Fox end up. Eventually, they're going to lose the rights to these pictures as well as Fantastic Four, because of Disney bought the whole kit and caboodle. And eventually, I guess, sometime those are going to revert to Disney at some point in time. They're not going to remain those properties anymore. So that'll be interesting to see.
Yeah,
Because I know,
crazy.
yeah, because Disney really wants to make this world.
They
as
want
they do in the comic
do they
books,
want a
they
theme
want
park?
crossover, probably.
So let's talk.
Well,
So I
based
guess
around a new theme park, which I will go to.
I want to.
we'll talk about the marketing. We'll kind of backtrack, but let's talk about the next kind of movies because we know Apocalypse is coming out, and we know Wolverine. So that's 2016 and 2017. We have Wolverine.
Right.
Another one?
Yeah.
Another
Yeah,
one.
I have another one.
Directed by
What?
Bryan Singer.
A reboot?
No,
No,
Wolverine-
just continuation.
Apocalypse is directed
And
by
I think
Bryan.
Wolverine is going to be James Mangold again, maybe. I don't
Yeah.
know if he's signed on yet.
I believe so. But so let's talk about Apocalypse. I mean, pardon the pun, the usual suspects are going to be back.
I'm also very. I mean, I think that I have some questions about this little button we had at the end about Apocalypse. There's certain things that I was confused by, and like I feel like I need to go rewatch the movie, or you guys can answer for me. Was she a woman or a man?
It's a man.
It doesn't
Apocalypse
matter.
is a man.
I know, but what did it look like in the film? I'm not talking about the comic book.
It looked like the mutant from The Last Stand that negated all powers, kind of, with tattoos all over him.
I was just like very confused because to me, the visual looked so different than the comic that I was like, are they changing it up a little? And who is this? It didn't really seem to.
If I'm going to be, I mean, going off of what John said, who knows? They might have just been like, okay, we got to get something because that's the way he made it
Yeah, they
seem.
just
So
threw it
I don't know.
together.
I don't know how much thought was actually put into making it look the way it's supposed to
Yeah.
look. So we'll find out if that is now what they're stuck with.
I don't know because like to me, I thought it was like a woman or something, and I was like, wait, I'm confused. And so I don't know if I might need to go back and watch.
I think that's going to be like the rise of Apocalypse. Like that's a scene from his origin story of that character. But as he becomes evil and whatever, they seal him away, and then that's when you get to present time where he's sealed away. And
Yeah, well, he's coming back in Apocalypse.
I think the way they're doing it, from what I've read, they're gonna be like in the late 70s, early 80s. So it's gonna be, now it's a sequel to First Class, Days of Future, and
This universe or this.
Particular timeline.
Yes, this timeline, I guess.
yes, this new age. And obviously every one of the young kids is back. Obviously they cast Gambit with Channing Tatum. A lot of controversy there. But in terms of McAvoy, Fassbender, Nicholas Hoult, Jennifer Lawrence, Hugh Jackman, and Evan Peters will reprise in their roles. So yeah. And we have younger versions of Cyclops and Jean Grey and Storm.
Which will be very interesting.
Well, yeah, and one of the things that, I don't know, did you touch upon it? We'll talk about Easter eggs. At
Sure,
some
let's-
point. And,
let's-
well, in my research for Easter eggs came the ending, the apocalypse, and as far as for how Singer intends to explain the sudden appearance of Apocalypse in the new continuity during the 1980s, without ever mentioning him in the original trilogy, there's actually a comic book precedent that could be used, they're saying. So while X-Men Days of Future Past undoes certain original trilogy developments, such as bringing back long-dead characters like Cyclops and Jean Grey, the post-credits apocalypse scene predates the altered timeline change up around 5,000 years. So again, this is another one of those time travel things that you can pull your hair, pull the hair out of your head. But for whatever reason, did not come into face with the X-Men. As a result, we can presume that Apocalypse is awakened by or attracted to Logan's trip through time and the subsequent change in reality. So that could be one way. I mean, I'm not in these writers' heads. I don't know what they have going on.
I believe it's going to be Magneto.
You believe it's Magneto.
Apocalypse is the pure mutant. He is the first mutant.
Right.
So it makes sense that on Magneto's leaving of this movie in Days of Future Past, he probably he's on his journey of self-discovery to find out the origin of all mutants. So it makes sense that he is researching Apocalypse without really knowing who he is, and he unleashes Apocalypse.
Oh, Magneto, always causing trouble.
But that would draw them back together and put Magneto back with Xavier, because that's like the strongest mutant ever. So they have to all be teamed together. And then they put adamantium on Wolverine.
There you go.
Way to wrap it
and
up,
then
Steve.
Phoenix comes to play.
Yeah, I was like, then you're gonna need Jean Grey to help balance all of that chaotic craziness that's bound to ensue.
And it's going to be a young Jean Grey, so who is this going to be played by?
Yeah.
Is there any hint on that?
Might have to Google.
Yeah, I don't think official news has come out. But, all right, I believe the last thing I do want to do your Easter eggs.
Yeah, it's there was a bunch for those comic book fans. The Lasting X is one of the top ones, and that's, it's fitting that the movie should earn an extra nod from the studio. So in Days of Future Past, like all other X-Men movies before it, the X of the 20th Century Fox title card remains lit for a moment longer. So that's always
they did
fun.
that in the last film.
What's in a year? The film starts with a bang, dropping audiences into a vision of the future. Does anybody? I didn't realize. Did they say what year it was?
Through math, it's 2023.
2023. Future is being overrun with Sentinels. Now, the year in which the future is shown to be overrun with Sentinels and the Earth's population suffering at their hands is actually the year 2013. What are the odds that would be the same year official production on the film actually began? Interesting. Sentinel powers over... let's see, over the future premises established, the movie wastes no time in dropping the surviving X-Men into battle against near invincible future Sentinels. As is shown in the film, robotic sentries absorbing the powers of the mutants. They fight thanks to their capture of Rogue, explained in our discussion, plot holes. The feature is shown as the powers of Sunspot and Iceman are turned against each other. But the Sentinels also show a few powers which would be familiar to fans of the past, specifically Spindly Claws of X2, X-Men United Deathstroke, and the Diamond Form, X-Men's First Class, Emma Frost, January Jones, and a rock form similar to that shown by Darwin before his death. So that's when Kitty Bishop and the Time Travelers, which I think we already discussed. Logan's souvenirs in his apartment. Apparently, Hugh Jackman's Wolverine may have left a love behind when he returned from Japan at the end of Wolverine, but he was apparently fond of more than a woman. Jackman had teased prior to the film's reveal that eagle-eyed fans should take a close look at his circa 1972 apartment. At first glance, closer inspection, I should say, a home video release. Wait for a home video release, but the samurai sword and photo of Mount Fuji are on his wall that he had in the last Wolverine movie. Not to mention the brown, yellow, and white striped curtains paying homage to his classic costume.
Also, on top of that, he is introduced not as Wolverine in that scene, but by Jimmy.
By Jimmy. Let's see, who else? Once Wolverine begins talking down to goons, the young woman, boss's daughter, with whom he'd been sleeping with, offer a word of protest, calling him Jimmy. The name may fly by casual viewers as a simple name he has adopted, but fans know that Logan's actual name is James Howlett. Since 1973.
And, if fans really kind of want to really dig into this, what's that website you're pulling all these from?
This is, I found this off of, this came off of Screen Rant. You actually have the link. I sent you the link to this.
Oh, cool.
There's just so many, and I think it's interesting because they do use some, like, verbally, some are set, but some are even just circumstantial. Like, we mentioned him, like, Wolverine going through the metal detector, or Wolverine being kind of squeamish on the plane. Like, all of these are tied into past films, and I like it that they use them in all different aspects, in lines, in visuals, in everything. And it's not just like, oh, we have to throw in a line every so often.
Yeah, the running jokes that their fans will appreciate, because we know that Wolverine doesn't like to fly.
Yeah.
Well, and the creators of like
The cameos.
Had Chris Claremont was in it for a bit. Len Wein was in it for a bit. So they listen, if you're a fan, and this is what I love about the Marvel movies, is that they put these little things in there, which are great. But, as the casual viewer, I'm not the big Marvel thing. I just think the movie works from beginning to end as a time travel story, as a comic book movie. We've been fortunate these past few years. We've had Captain America, great comic book version, and this movie, we're fortunate. We're lucky. We're getting good stories, and Marvel Studios.
As we wrap this up, let's just really touch upon the kind of marketing and the reception. As we talked about, I mean, there's so many brilliant ways. They had we kind of mentioned a few of them, but they had 3 viral websites: TraskIndustries.com, thebentbullet.com, referring to, of course, the John F. Kennedy,
Right.
and
Which was a great storyline, by the way. I don't think we've really
was
mentioned
funny.
too much about it,
terrific.
but they added it and also had the turn halfway through,
Yeah.
where it was him trying to save him and he
Yeah.
wasn't all.
Stop.
That was a
That
great
was-
twist.
It was
It
a
was a
great
great
I thought it was a great,
twist.
because I didn't see it coming. And it's like I was trying to save him.
Yeah.
That was a great twist.
Yeah.
He was one of us.
Yeah.
It was a
One of
really,
us.
it was a good thought out subplot.
I thought so.
and 25moments.com. And speaking of Jackman, I would appreciate this because I'm a WWE fan, but he made an appearance on Raw to help promote the movie, which is always great.
And they also released a bunch of videos. They didn't just release trailers, but they released video segments about the mutants, about going in more in depth. For instance, I know they did a little video clip on Mystique, and they used footage from the film, and it was very similar to the trailer footage, but then they would do the Mystique, alias is Mystique, name is Raven, power star, blah blah blah. And so they did do little kind of twists on their own trailer and put those up online.
And they did a fantastic job too of, like I said, retconning Last Stand. We've been picking on that a lot, but they've done a great job at re-educating an audience and bringing this back to the early roots that audiences really love to begin with. And or I should say, First Class was really well received by critics and audiences alike. And I just think that by bringing the old and the new together, that they made it in a way that's understandable. People could applaud, they could cheer and say, hey, I remember that. And I just think from a marketing standpoint, they re-educated an audience without it tasting like medicine, being that it was forced on me. I was appreciative of new trailers. The posters that they came up with were fantastic. And, they did a bang up job, I think, all the way.
In terms of as you're talking about getting kind of people re-educated and young kids, I mean, they partnered with CKE Restaurant Holdings, which owns Carl Jr.'s and Hardee's. And so they did obviously a big push with those and kind of the X-Men, and it's because ultimately it was so funny to hear that the kids really understood it, because ultimately that's who X-Men is for, is kids. And then of course they partnered with Mountain Dew.
Yeah.
Or do you guys remember Mountain Dew and
Sure.
the baseball thing?
That made me. I was like,
But
going,
a lot
Jesus,
of Pepsi
I don't
products
even
are
remember Mountain
used
Dew back
in
then.
film.
But not back then. For some reason, to me, Mountain Dew was totally 80s. Not so much 1973. I don't just remember Mountain Dew in 1973, but then I researched Mountain Dew, and Mountain Dew's been around for a very, very long time.
But Mountain Dew is Pepsi, and Pepsi's used in a lot of film. I always see Pepsi products, and I
Pepsi
hardly
had a big
ever see
screen
Coke.
in
Yeah.
Coliseum or
Yeah.
whatever. The
I
arena.
hardly ever see Coke, but Pepsi's used in almost every movie.
I noticed.
I know.
Product placement.
Yeah.
I'm curious. There's a huge article about China just eating up this movie.
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Obviously, it's very
Maybe it's
successful.
because they got the original theme version.
Wolverine, yeah.
No,
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
talking about they
Really?
have a
They're
different
loving this
version.
thing.
What do you guys? I mean,
That's true.
on basically whatever the equivalent of opening weekend is, but 6.5 million people saw it, which amounted to about $40 million US dollars. That is,
It's huge overseas. I mean, yeah, in China being one, in China is becoming a really they're focusing a lot of news on China, especially on box office lately, and it's all about the import export of American films, because they used to not really allow that many American films to go in. They'd want to send a lot of their movies over, but now there's this resurgence, and they're a lot more American films now are embracing China, but they want people to start filming in China, and they're even cracking down, because a lot of theaters too in China have been scamming the audience people by either they're not reporting proper box office. They're scamming from the top, from the ticket takers, and China's coming down hard in those theaters. But when you look at it, I mean, to date, of recent, like the total domestic gross is 124.5 million. The worldwide box office is close to 300 million. So that's, superheroes do well, and the X-Men, and Hugh Jackman, I think, is a part of that. I think he's an international man of mystery, or there's no mystery at all. People like him, and people like a good superhero movie. So,
and this one, it had I don't know the time of this, but 91% according to critics' ratings.
Rotten Tomatoes is 91% as of this morning. Yeah,
that's huge. And so I know there was a lot of hype about this movie, whether or not it'd be good, but like it's living up to everyone's expectations.
Yeah. And that's what you want to like.
I think it helps that the other ones that came out prior to this didn't live up to people's expectations.
Well, yeah, I mean,
finally.
Yeah, I mean, it helps.
But as mentioned multiple times, you can appreciate the past ones now because of this. It's like, it all fits in somehow into the universe.
Yeah, and the cinema score on the movie is an A, which is really good for this. And you're getting a great cross section of people, going to paying their money to see this movie. The audience I saw it with was filled with men, women alike, kids, families, which is great.
Everyone.
But I would say there may be a little bit skewed male, but there were a lot of women in the audience, and it was a sold out show that I saw.
That's because of Hugh Jackman, Days of Future Ass. I think that's why.
Nice pun. All right.
I like the movie in general.
But it doesn't hurt.
About it.
I like
Hugh Jackman.
Yeah, I like where this movie left us off with, because it left so many open doors and new possibilities for all these X-Men. Because now that like a lot of people have actually existed and are alive, they haven't been killed. What other mutants out there have been killed, and bring them back? And so it's just so many more people we could see.
And now it's going to get into. I think now the problem is going to be like. We've talked about Hugh Jackman. He's been playing this role for quite some time now. And now he has to still stay in the same age for another how many movies?
I had heard that the next Wolverine movie, it might be the one where he hangs up his claws. I mean, we've talked about this before. How long is it before an actor, as much as he loves it, he's got to come to the conclusion.
Yeah, at some point. And anyway, wouldn't it be great if at some point he decides, okay, I'm going to hang him up? That would be an amazing movie. The death sequence or how he dies. You know how many people would be just mourning that?
If they kill him off, I can't see them kill him off.
I know, but I would love it if they did.
Not with
That'd
his
be
mutation
amazing.
or something, like attacks his mutant gene.
Yeah, it just seems, I don't know.
It'd be great if they did. Send him off.
That day's going to happen. Again, we talked about this before too. Same thing with like Robert Downey Jr. and, but Hugh Jackman has been playing this role. God bless him, for a very long time.
Well, and also, like, Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart, they thought that the last movie they did was going to be the last.
They're probably hoping,
I think
how can we bring this back?
I think they're appreciative of these roles because they've, like, mentioned how much they like them and their friendship. But that's, they're not super young anymore. And how many movies can they do? And these are very action-packed and they're strenuous.
Kelling looks different from the first movie.
So, as we wrap this up, I want to leave fans on 3 fun facts that maybe you knew, maybe you didn't know. But bald actor Yul Brynner inspired the look of Professor X.
Oh.
Known from Magnificent Seven, 10 Commandments, King and I.
Yes.
Westworld.
The original X-Men were Jean Grey, Cyclops, Iceman, Angel, and the Beast, in that order. And
It was sad to see Angel's wings.
It was
in that
indeed.
display case.
And the cover of the Uncanny X-Men number 141, the comic that starts the Days of Future Past story arc, is one of the most frequently paid homages in the comic book industry.
Oh,
Fantastic.
okay.
So there you go. I'm glad it lived up to the hype. I'm glad we had John Ottman. Thank you guys for listening
Thank
to us.
you.
Obviously, even though we went 2 hours and a half, I'm sure there are 8,000 things we haven't hit. So please, as fans, let us know. John, I know.
No, you're right. You're right.
Hey,
you're right.
we can do another 4 hours and we still wouldn't cover this.
No, you guys could. I don't think I could.
Thank you guys so much for listening. You guys have been great.
Thank you.
You guys are the best fans. Let us know what you guys are thinking. Let us know your anticipation for Apocalypse. I know it's going to be 2 years, but we're going to blink, and it's going to be the Apocalypse. On behalf of Demetri Panos, Sara Stretton, John Comerford, John Ottman, Marisa Serafini, and Stephen Lemieux in the booth, who's played this thing like 20 times just because.
You know, I don't care. I love this theme song. It's
Anyway,
amazing.
we'll see you here. AnatomyOfMovie.com, Movie Anatomy on Twitter. We'll see you here for the next dissection.
Thanks. Bye, all.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the rest of the Anatomy of a Movie staff, we would like to thank you for listening and subscribing to the show. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to email or tweet us. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been Anatomy of a Movie.
Thanks for watching Anatomy of a Movie on YouTube. For more on your favorite movies, subscribe to our channel here, and be sure to let us know what you think in our comment section below here. Bye.